So hey guys, welcome back to my channel. What if Naruto was alternative god in reality and the psycho lover of Rias? Movie. Rias waited for Akeno to come back from seeing who was knocking at the door of the occult research club house. She was in the middle of talking with her peerage members about different tasks she had for them when she heard a knock at the door. She was surprised at first as they do not get many visitors before Akeno went to see who it was. Her other pieces, Kiba and Kaneko, were waiting quietly while Kaneko ate her chocolate snack. They looked up when Akeno walked in holding a brown package. Who is it, Akeno? Raised asked. Her queen looked up confused. No one was at the door but this package was sitting there. I checked it and there was no sign of holy magic, so I am not sure what it is. Rias frowned at this before she took the package Akeno offered. She opened the box and pulled out a book. It was a pure black book with the title reading Twin Tales the Pure in gold writing. She read the title aloud in confusion, not noticing Kaneko glancing at her. She felt a bit concerned with anything that had a title of Twin Tale. Rias looked the book over and saw it had nothing else written on it besides the title. As she was about to open the book, Kiba said, "Bucho, there is a letter." Rias looked down and saw a letter sticking out of the box. She picked it up and opened it. She read aloud. Dear heir to the Grimoire family. I hope you actually open my package, as it will bring some insight on the future of not only your peerage but to yourself. It is not a tale of future itself but a possibility of what could have been. This is when a single powerful soul is introduced into the world and how it changes everything. Please read with your peerage, both old members and new members. I know you shall gain. Try and leave this book in your hands only, for the information, while different, can still lead to drastic changes in which terrible things may happen. I hope you enjoy. With best wishes, Amaterasu. Rias was stunned, and she was not the only one, as her whole peerage was silent. Akeno was the first to say anything. Era, to think we got a gift from a goddess. So unexpected. Kiba looked up at his king. So, should we read it? He was interested in what would happen, and he wondered he would find a clue on how to avenge his friends. No, Kaneko stated, not wanting anything to do with this. Rias however looked at the front of the book. If this says to be true, then while it might not be the same, it may still help her. This could point out possible peerage members she can add to her own. This could give her a clue on how she can get out of her marriage. This was too good to pass up as she opened the book. The others, though Kaneko was frowning slightly, sat around her as she started. Chapter 1, Rebirth. In an endless sea of colors and shapes, this space of the universe was known as the dimensional gap. A place that was so ever-changing that it was very much like looking through a kaleidoscope, yet the colors were so vivid you knew you were not looking through such a thing. Instead, a person could only marvel at its wonder before dying. The dimensional gap was a place where the void was present, and any life forms without protection would die within seconds of entering this beautiful bridge between worlds. In this world there was only a single entity that could call this place a home, and at this moment she was calmly sitting down in the nothingness of the gap. She was Ophis, the dragon god of infinity, and she was currently taking the form of a young girl with long black hair. Her skin was as pale as the moon, but her gray eyes had such a cold life to them. Her clothes were black with frills, but did not cover her stomach or chest. She simply wore two X-shaped black markings over her nipples to keep them hidden from the world. Instead of a skirt, shorts, or even pants, this goddess wore none other than simple frilly bloomers to cover her bottom. The group blinked hearing this. They've heard of the dragon god before, but they did not expect her to look like that. While a god, she is able to change her looks, it still stunned them slightly. Kaneko felt a small sense of pride here. Almost every powerful woman she has met all had large figures and big breasts, even her king had a large bust. To hear someone even more powerful than them be considered to have a tiny figure much like her own was nice. She alone could call this place her true home, but she was currently not alone in this world that she enjoyed. Another being was with her, seemingly frozen in time with how they would not move a single inch. Not a breath could be heard from the one with her, and as she stroked this being's hair the colors started to fade away to reveal his form. This was a young man with the messiest of blonde hair, and his skin was like the sun had kissed him. He was young, looking to only be 17 years old at most, while also being average height for his age. The most unique trait about him was the 3 whisker marks that were on his face, seeing as they stood out from the rest of his relatively normal features that you would find on handsome young man. He was well built, and his body was seemingly sculpted from the hardest of stone. Ophis ran her finger along the pectoral muscle that was showing through the young mont's ripped clothes. "Oh," Akino said, thinking of such a boy. Rias pictured it, and while there were no pictures, she felt like the boy would no doubt good looking. This was Naruto Uzumaki, the greatest hero that the human race had been able to produce in the last 10,000 years. No others have been able to match him since the day that he had passed from the world of the living, and she had personally collected his soul. Since his passing, she had spent countless hours working to restore what remained of him to his former glory. For it was his final moments that had gained her interest in him. Naruto Uzumaki had been a ninja in his life. He had been a warrior that was trained to kill and die for his village, and he personally had been given a rotten deal in life. Even from a young age, he was weak and defenseless, but he never gave up. He grew and grew to almost impossible levels of power, power that was without true match to this day. Only the most powerful of angels, devils, and fallen angels could scratch the surface of his true power. Even if somebody did have more power than him, Ophis had little doubt that Naruto would still win any fight. He was a force that did not just rely on fighting, but truly connecting his feelings and understand to other. He could make even the most demented of men switch the two side of good, and in battle he could pull monstrously effective moves out of nowhere. When most people would give up, this human would strive forward and do the impossible. The group was stunned. A human did all of that. He was that powerful. Amazing, Kiba muttered, impressed at someone who was human to have such skill. Akino thought about it. This soul must be the one that changes everything. The one the goddess mentioned. Rias nodded and wondered if she would be gaining this Naruto as a member of her peerage. This human made an impression on her on the day of his death all those years ago, and because of that she had decided that she would restore his soul and give this man that had been dealt a bad hand in life a new hand. She was going to allow him to become a new man, or rather, she would let him reincarnate into a happier life. She did have her own reasons for this, but she knew that one day his power may be needed again. This human, whose potential had been underestimated, had never reached his full potential, and if he was to do that he would no longer need to be human. On top of Naruto's unclothed stomach was an orange object, a jacket. This jacket was neatly folded on it, and the design showing on the back was that of a circle with more circle inside of it. Under that concentrated circle were 9 teardrop-shaped magatama, with the entire design being in black. Each magatama was lined up 3 to a row, into 3 rows like a square. She knew that if she allowed him all his previous power in this new life, then he would grow too arrogant in his nature, or at least he would become a wild card. That was why when she was in the process of restoring his broken soul, she took his greatest power from him and transformed it into an object. This jacket held his godly power that had killed a man that could indeed slay a god. The group was quite hearing this. He killed a man that could kill a god. "I rather not go up against him," Kiba admitted. "But he does not have that power," Akino pointed out. "His power is now that jacket. I guess he will have to find it or something." Rias did not say anything as she read on, wanting to see this Naruto and who he would become. One day, this object would be made known to him and he would slowly regain what he had lost. He would regain his powers that had made him into the oppressive man to her. This was his sacred gear, amazing tools given to human souls so that they could allow them to do great or terrible things. She wanted this to be his, because once he was reincarnated his chance of naturally getting a sacred gear were 0. Only part of full humans were allowed these, and the family she picked for him to be reborn into was not human. Kaneko bit her lips slightly. She knew what Naruto would become, if the title has anything to say about it. She hoped the two knew each other as she sure wished she had someone with her in her darkest days. She wanted him to have something of his old life, but she also wanted him to truly retain the pureness she had come to respect. That was why she would not haunt him with how he once was, and the memories of those he lost. As she rebuilt this lost soul, she had been slowly removing the things from his mind that would cause him great sadness. She would lock away the memories of his powers into his sacred gear, and should the day come that he activates it she would start to watch him once more. As it was, she was using most of her power keeping the one she hates the most out of the gap. As it was, she would only be able to hold out her strength only so much longer before she was forced to reincarnate him without him waking up first, and should her enemy come into this plane she would be forced to leave, for she would not have the power to get him out on her own. She felt him stir ever so lightly, as he breathed the first breath in his many years of death. This was the breath that she knew would be the one to grant him new life, but yet he showed no signs of waking. Finally, as a sign from above, the orange sun mark on the palm of his right hand started to glow once more with life. Naruto Uzumaki jerked awake once more, but found that he was unable to move of his own free will. The group was on the edge of their seat waiting for whatever Naruto will do. Where am I? Naruto questioned weakly in his own mind, for he was without much of his memory at this time. The years passing having gotten him to forget much of what even Ophis did not touch, a clean slate given to a hero that was undeserved by the masses. Ophis would only do this for him and only him, and she placed her hand over his heart and got his attention. Uzumaki Naruto, you are in my home. I have decided to grant you new life. I have watched over you for so long now, Uzumaki Naruto. You were a great hero once upon a time, Uzumaki Naruto, but you were not given the life you should have had. Ophis spoke smoothly, not speaking any more than she had to. It is still nice of her, Kiba muttered, still surprised that the dragon god did all of that. Rias frowned, knowing that Ophis also had a plan of her own for Naruto as well. She spoke what was needed to get the point across and not a single thing more. She felt a shaking hand touch the side of her face, before moving to her hair. Such nice hair, as black as night. Naruto spoke the only thing he could think of as he gazed up at her, his hand finding the strength to move for the first time in so long. His eyes went to the sun on his palm, but he found more comfort in looking at this beautiful girl's hair. Ophis looked down at Naruto without showing her emotion, seeing as she made her hair this color because she liked the color black. Rias blinked here, after everything she says, and he focuses on her hair. Maybe he did not hear her, Akeno suggested, getting shrugs. Uzumaki Naruto, this is why you are being given a new life. You are a champion that came before your time. I have seen your soul, and your soul will soon find happiness that you were denied. Ophis spoke once more as snakes made out of the shadows of her powers came from her skin, and despite the texture looking like that of ink, they slowly crawled over Naruto's flesh and sank into his body. The jacket also glowing and sinking into his flesh as well, and right on the inside of the orange sun glowing on his palm appeared a second symbol inside the first one. Now that orange sun had a black infinity symbol inside it, the glowing sun and the black infinity. One fit him perfectly, while the other showed that she had a hand in his reincarnation. This was also her blessing to him, but would not become active just yet. Ophis closed her eyes, before she felt Naruto start to vanish from her lap. Just as he fully vanished, she felt the barrier she had been keeping up break. The Great Red had invaded her home. Interesting, Rias muttered, I wonder how much will change with Naruto being here. How do you know he will be here? Akeno asked, he could be anywhere. A feeling, Rias replied, I think Naruto will be a member of my peerage. The others looked at one another, they all thought the same thing, will he really become a devil in their group, and what piece will he be? With Naruto. Ka-san, look at them, aren't they beautiful? A young woman wearing a black kimono asked as she held two small babies into her large chest. Her pitch black hair fell down to the middle of her back, and her golden eyes glowed with love for the two newborn babies in her arms. Her pale skin had a hint of red on it from how much happiness she was feeling at seeing the birth of her younger siblings. The two black cat ears on her head were twitching in excitement, while her two tails were moving swiftly behind her in joy. Kaneko stiffened hearing this. That woman sounds a lot like her sister. It could be anyone, any Nekosho, no matter how rare we are. Besides, she said two babies, so it can't be her. But no matter how much she denied it, she had the feeling it was true. Each child in her arms were both beautiful in their own right. The one in her left arm was the older sibling of the two babies. This was on a cute little baby girl, and like herself she had cat ears coming from her head. Only these ears were white, just like the small tuft of hair on her head. Her eyes were opened and looking around everywhere, showing that they were a golden yellow color like hers were. Her skin was pale like Kuroka's, and her little white tail was moving like no tomorrow. Konikao was still listening. It sounded like herself as a baby, but until she heard her own name she will not believe it. The second one, the youngest sibling of the trio, was a little baby boy. Unlike either sister, this boy had naturally tanned skin, like he was born under the sun. 3 small whisker marks stood out on each cheek, giving him the look of a cute little kitten. His tail was wrapped around her forearm, and she saw that there was a small tuft of pure white hair on his head. It was white just like his sister's hair, but instead of a single color for eyes she noticed that he had 2 colors. Not 2 colors exactly, but she was able to see that one second they would turn blue, before they went back to a golden yellow. "That's him," Kiba pointed out. "I think we figured that out ourselves," Rias added politely. Kaneko took a deep breath, shocked to hear the hero of great power was a nekosho like her, and if it was to be believed her own brother. She tried to deny it, but the feeling was getting stronger now. The mother of these 2 babies was currently laying against the side of a tree, and she wore a blood-stained white kimono. Her skin was beyond pale, and her white hair fell down to her breasts. Her dull yellow eyes peered out from her curtain of hair, looking at the children she had birthed with a weak smile on her face. She didn't have much strength left in her, and she was bleeding out fast. She knew that she didn't have long to live, but sadly for her she had not been able to get help fast enough to find a good place to birth her children. Kaneko stiffened hearing this. She never knew her mother as she died giving birth to her. While she never knew her, she kept the tears from flowing. She still did not want to believe it, but if this was her mother, then she was a nekosho, which meant that she was a third-class citizen in the underworld. Most of the devils would ignore their cries for help, with very few truly helping them succeed in life. Sadly, they were also a poor family because of how hard it was to find a job in the underworld these days. "Kuroka-chan, what are their names?" Kaneko gasped softly, although Rias did one louder. Rias was stunned hearing that Naruto was the little brother to one of the most dangerous criminals in the underworld. Kaneko however focused on hearing her mother's last words. She did not know them at her birth and she hoped her mother would be proud of her. The mother of the twins asked with a smile, knowing that her eldest daughter would pick out a good name for them. Kuroka got down on the ground and moved her mother's hair out of her face with a sad smile. She knew that she had been born with a weak body. Her mother had always been a rather weak person when it came to physical labor. She had nearly died giving birth to her a while back, so birthing another child, let alone 2, was a death sentence to her. The other members of the group frowned sadly. They felt it was terrible that Naruto and his new family would be without a mother. "This one is going to be Sharon because of her white hair, and how cute her little sounds are. I do not know what to name my little brother though. Why don't you name him Ka-san? As your last act you should name him." Kuroka offered kindly to the dying woman, knowing that deep in her heart that she wanted to name at least one of the children before she passed on to the afterlife. Kaneko smiled softly hearing her mother naming her brother. There was no longer denying it as her little newborn self was named before everyone here. She was grateful no one knew her real name, otherwise things could be uncomfortable for her. The woman moved her head up to look at the little baby boy, before she coughed out a glop of blood onto her stomach. She started to go into a coughing fit, and she got her hand up to her mouth near the end. Kuroka watched with small tears in her eyes at how her mother was dying in front of her eyes, but with her happy smile never leaving her face. She watched her mother take her hand away from her mouth, and she looked at the blood in her hand for a moment. She watched as the blood all around her hand began to move towards the middle of her palm, bending and moving along the pale skin until the blood touched in the middle of her palm. Her eyes widened when she saw the perfect name for her youngest child in her blood. She glanced at Kuroka, before she used as much strength as she could to move her hand up and show her oldest child what rested on her palm. A single design, something that had come at the perfect moment. The blood she had coughed up had formed the design of a whirlpool on the middle of her hand. Rias went wide-eyed. "Naruto, it means maelstrom, a kind of storm or whirlpool." Akeno smiled. "Well, at least our hero still has his name. Naruto, he will be named, after the most power, kind of whirlpool, a maelstrom. Tell them, that I don't regret giving birth to them," the nameless mother of 3 said before her head slumped forward and her arms touched the ground with a thump. This woman, who had used her final moment to tell her children that she loved them in her own way, had died in the middle of the forest with a smile on her face. Thus was a mother's love, to give her life for her children at the drop of a hat. She had been proud of herself in her final moments for having lived such a happy life. Having raised her eldest child, having birthed her youngest too, and having named her last. She had died a happy woman. Rias noticed that her rook was now crying quietly. "Kaneko?" she asked worried. Kaneko rubbed her eyes. "Keep going," she muttered. Rias was still worried when she noticed Kiba and Akino were very sad as well, but none has a bigger reaction than Kaneko. She went back to reading, still keeping an eye on Kaneko. "Don't worry, Ka-san, Sharon-chan and Naruto-chan will be safe. I will protect them with my life if I have to, no matter what. I will always put them before myself, just like you did," Kuroka said as the tears finally broke through her eyes lashes and fell down her pretty face. She wouldn't have been this way if her mother had not said something so beautiful in her final moments. She kissed her younger siblings on the foreheads just as they started to cry loudly, as if knowing that their mother was dead. Kuroka made a promise to herself at that moment, an oath that she was using her tears to bind her to. From this day forward, she would make sure that Sharon and Naruto would be happy. No matter the cost to herself, she would raise these two with as much love as she could. Her mother died bringing them into this world, and she would die to protect them from this world if she had to do it. That was the job of the eldest after all, to love and protect her younger siblings even if they grow to hate her. Kaneko frowned here. Her sister gave no such oath, as far as she knew. And even if she did, she broke it easily with what she did. Life would be hard, it has always been, but if they were a family, then maybe things wouldn't be so bad. There was a saying that true love conquers all, and what love is truer than that of the bonds made between siblings? And that's the end of the chapter, Rias said as she closed the book. "Oh, let me read the next one," Akino pleaded. "So called Graphia Tan." Rias blinked here. She only knew two people that called Graphia that, Seraphal and her brother. She did not expect them to be seen so soon. A handsome man with long red hair said as he rubbed the side of his head with his hand. By looks he seemed to be in his mid-20s, and his skin was fairer than you would usually see in a guy. His bright green eyes showed plenty of kindness in them, and he wore golden armor over his body that gave him an extremely regal appearance to him. He was Sears X Lucifer Grimori, and he was one of the 4 Satans of the underworld. Sears X was currently taking a walk down into one of the cities with his wife and servant Graphia Lucifer. Graphia Lucifer was a high-class woman with silver hair and silver eyes that seemed to take on a more serious outlook on life, which seemed to be there for the purpose of balancing out her husband's stupidity. She was seen wearing a maid's uniform, and she was frowning lightly at her husband. In truth, she really did love him dearly, but in public she had told him many times that his reputation was at stake by treating her with too much affection. Currently, he and she were trying to find something for his younger sister. Her birthday was coming up, and being the sis-con that he is, Sears X always tried his very hardest to get his younger sister the most amazing gifts possible. Rias smiled hearing of her brother and his wife Queen. She wasn't all that surprised at her brother's actions, but she tried to guess when this was now. "We are here to find Rias-sama a gift, Sears X-sama, please remember this reason," Graphia pointed out politely, and she blinked with her husband when they noticed that something small was running towards their direction. Sears X was the one that caught what the small figure was when he noticed a small white-haired child covered in dirt running towards them with an armful of bread in his arms, and by the tatters his clothes were in it was easy to tell that he was homeless. Yet, his body was very healthy, and not underfed like that of the usual homeless children. The boy noticed them, and he seemed too startled for a second before he heard a commotion coming from nearby. "A Nekomata. Well, this is a rare surprise, I thought that none of them were left," Sears X thought with a small smile on his face when he saw the young Nekosho, and a male one at that. Male Nekomata were so rare these days, that even in the already rare Nekosho race, they were considered more valuable than 10 castles worth of treasure these days. Kaneko frowned at that. While she knew the rarity of her race and a male one at that, it did not mean she and her brother can be given a value like that. Even if she could be now as a servant to Rias. Any collector of yukai would be having an orgasm just by looking at a fine specimen like this one, healthy, young, and with a flare of life. They were both surprised when the boy looked behind him in a panic, before he started to use one clawed hand to climb up the wall to a nearby building. Just in time because moments later when he was out of sight a middle-aged man with an average appearance came from around the corner. Damn it. The brat got away again, this is the 4th time this week. Why don't those beasts ever steal from somebody else? Question mark. You hear me you little brat, if you do this again I will catch you and gut you myself. The man shouted out in frustration at having his merchandise stolen once more by the brat that had just climbed up to the roof of the building. The couple were able to see white hair and white cat's ears sticking up from the edge of the roof, and neither really decided to tell the man that the thief that had stolen his bread was close by. It would seem that the man had given up anyway because he went back where he came from with an angry grunt. Rias giggled at this, it seems Naruto has made himself a cute successful little thief. So cute. Graphia was about to call out to the child on the roof, before she felt somebody bump into her from behind and touch her rear end. She and her husband turned around to lecture about how molesting the wife of a Satan was a bad idea, before they both saw a second white-haired child sitting on the ground while rubbing her head. This child was obviously a girl, and besides the pale skin she looked just like the white-haired boy with the bread. The girl shook her head, before she stood up and started to run away before either Graphia or Searsex could say anything to her. She ran behind the corner, and the white-haired boy vanished from the rooftop. Twin Nekomata. Well, this is a lucky day it would seem. I just know that today I am going to pick out the best birthday present for Rias Tan. Searsex said with a good amount of excitement, and his wife sighed lightly and prepared to check how much she had in her purse for this perfect gift. Rias blinked here coming to a conclusion of what her brother might be getting her. She glanced at Kaneko thinking. Kaneko frowned thinking along the same lines. Did this mean she and her family would be with Rias' family before the other devil took her sister and she killed him? Could this mean her family could be whole and better than it is here? She recalled the title and figured she might have to wait and see. She blinked in shock when she saw that the straps to her purse had been cut completely by something, and the end of her purse where she kept all the money had completely vanished. Rias blinked while Akeno giggled, Era, it seems the strongest queen just got her purse stolen. It's funny when you think about it. Kaneko did not agree since she knew it was her that stole the purse. She feared for her counterpart here. Searsex-sama, it would seem that we have been robbed by a small child. Graphia pointed out with an annoyed, a very annoyed, tone to her voice that spoke volumes for how angry she really was. Kaneko gulped quietly here. Searsex only smiled lightly and looked into the direction that the small children had run off in, because it would seem that they had been robbed by the same people that had been robbing the people of this city for a while now. There had been reports of small robberies happening in this city, but never anything too serious. The most that has never been reported stolen was food and clothing. You know, I may have just found the perfect gift for Rias. Searsex said with complete honesty as he walked in the direction that the children had last been seen by them. Graphia caught on to what he was going on about, and she sighed very lightly but couldn't help but agree with his logic in this. Very well then Searsex-sama. Graphia said with a light bow, before she followed behind her husband as he took the last known path that the children had used. Kaneko now knew what was going to happen next. She still worried about what could happen but she hoped for the best. She was still rather ashamed that she had not noticed that her purse had been stolen from her until after she checked for how much money she had. It was a blow to her pride that somebody had stolen from her, and frankly it showed that she was getting lax with her sensing ability if a child had managed to steal something so important from her. With Naruto and Sharon, it had been 5 years since the twin Nekosho had been born, and for the most part life had been fulfilling for them. Naruto and Sharon had each been well raised by their older sister Koka, and she had made sure that they would have everything they needed. Everything had been great for them, or at least as great as things can be when you are homeless. Sure, they had to steal for survival, but that was a small matter to the siblings. It wasn't like they were going to be sold things at the regular price anyway, so stealing was their only real option in life. From a young age Naruto and Sharon were both taught how to steal without getting caught, and using their senses to the limit so that they could avoid being catching them. If they were caught then Koka would come in and knock the devil that caught them out, before she robbed them blind and they all went to safety. At least she teaches and protects them, Kiba pointed out getting nods from Akeno and Rias. Today was actually a pretty big haul for the trio of siblings as Naruto and Sharon ran towards Kuroka as fast as their little legs could carry them. Lately Kuroka had been disappearing without telling them about it, and when she came back she would smell like blood. Naruto and Sharon never thought anything of it, but they were curious to what she did when they stole things. Kaneko stiffened hearing this. What was her sister doing now? Would she do something like it did here? Oni-chan, I have bread nya. Naruto shouted childishly as he ran up to his giggling sister when she saw that he was having trouble keeping his balance with all the bread he had gotten. She smiled lightly at him, and the youngest of the group beamed when he saw her smile at him. He placed the bread in her lap. I got a purse, Sharon said with a very small blush on her face. To them money was a lot less important than food, so the winner of today's small contest was obviously Naruto since he had managed to get enough bread for them to have a decent lunch. Since they didn't even really use money, most of the time they would just use it as a method to help start a fire. Then once they had a fire going they would only need to gather sticks. It was rather funny that when they got money, they literally threw that money away by burning it. Rias giggled here unable to stop herself. The others either smiled, giggled or stared. Guess which one did which. Sharon placed the purse next to Kuroka, and the eldest sister placed both of the twins on her lap with a cat-like grin on her face. Both of you did very well, but it would seem that you still messed up slightly nya. Kuroka hinted when she noticed that somebody had entered their territory. Both Naruto and Sharon blinked in confusion when they heard her say that, and looking around childishly they could see anyone following them. Kuroka frowned when she felt how powerful both of the people that were nearby were, since neither of them would be somebody that she would stand a chance against while protecting two children. She looked at the two children, before she smiled lightly and pressed them against her chest. Then her eyes sharpened and she struck both of her younger siblings in the back of the neck, knocking them both out before they could even react to her hitting them. She stood up and safely placed her siblings against the tree, before she stood in front of them with sharp eyes that pierced through the darkness of the forest they were in. Kiba frowned. He did not approve of hitting the two like that even if it kept them safe. From the looks of Ria's face she agreed too. There goes the element of surprise. Her apparent enemy stated as she saw the current Lucifer and his wife come out of the shadows now that they were obviously caught. He had a sheepish expression on his face, while his wife placed the tips of her fingers against her head while shaking her cranium slightly to show what she thought of her husband ruining the element of surprise. I didn't sense your power, I smelled you out. Not even you can hide your scent. Satan read nya, and my sense of smell is too powerful for you to trick nya. Kuroka said with a frown on her face, her danger senses not going off yet for some reason. Rias smiled. While her brother was many things he did not attack randomly or without reason. It was like somewhere in her she didn't register this guy as a threat, or at least that he wasn't going to attack them in cold blood without letting them put up a fight. That, or he liked children and didn't want to kill the one raising the two children behind her. That too, Rias thought agreeing with Kuroka. It seemed strange she agreed with the criminal but she figured this was before it happened. Neko show it is then, I can't sense you at all. Graphia pointed out as she tried to sense for Kuroka's aura, but was surprised when she found nothing. She could feel the aura of the two knocked out children, but the aura of the one standing in front of them was so well hidden that it was like it wasn't even there at all. They weren't being suppressed either, but it was like they didn't even exist. You noticed me hiding my aura with senjutsu then, no surprise there that the strongest queen would be able to tell that I was a Nekosho nya. That leaves one question though, why are you here? Kuroka asked with narrowed eyes, her yellow eyes glowing with power waiting to be unleashed. She could take out the silver-haired devil, but not Searsex. Rias was surprised to hear this. She knew Kuroka is powerful and dangerous but to think she could defeat Graphia. She did not know if that was true or not and she did not want to know. A Satan-level opponent would be far too much for her to fight at this moment in time, but an ultimate class devil was just in her range of ability. One good hit was all she would need, if she would get that hit remained to be seen. Now, don't be so hostile. We don't want any trouble, but we do need to get our money back. Searsex said with a silent wish that nothing got started over this. He didn't want to get the little kids to get hurt in the conflict, so he would try and play the mediator. He could already tell that Koka's and Graphia's opposite personalities would create friction between them. In the last few years, it had been confirmed that Koka had been killing dozens of devils around the area for some unknown reason. He guessed he got his answer from how she was defending the two smaller children behind her. Kaneko blinked here. Her sister was killing devils to protect them. She did not know how she felt about that. She wondered if her sister felt the same and would have protected her. She did not know, nor did she think she could handle the answer. "Take your money and leave NYA," Koka said as she kicked the purse over to them. She had no use for the money anyway other than for starting a fire. Graphia caught her purse, before she looked to see if it could be fixed. She sighed in relief when she realized that her purse would have to be repaired, but it was fixable. Koka's eyes narrowed when she saw that neither of the devils were moving from their spots, and they didn't look like they were about to leave either. "Thank you for returning that money, but our business isn't finished yet. You see, we couldn't help but notice that these two had to steal to live. I will be honest with you when I ask you if this is the kind of life you want them to live." Sears X pointed out with a small wave towards Naruto and Sharon. Koka charged at Sears X with rage in her eyes, before she jumped back when she noticed that he was leaking out his family ability. The black and red power of destruction that originally came from the Bale family, but was later obtained when Lord Grimori married a woman from the Bale family. Such a power was just as deadly at her senjutsu. Both were pretty much one-hit kills to most opponents that didn't have experience fighting against it, or very high resistances. She was not ready to fight something like this, not without a plan for it, that is. Rias was on the edge of her seat, as was Kaneko. Both were worried, but both for slightly different reasons. "There is no other way to live for us. Devils like you have it easy. You were born with a high status, and society looked to you as the future NYA. We are considered to be the lowest part of low, and have to do anything we can to get up in the world NYA. Yet, we are still happy. You have nothing that you can do to help us," Koka said firmly, knowing that she wouldn't be able to go with this person. Rias was quite here while the others looked down. They knew how they would have been treated and such without Rias and how she made their lives better. Rias knew she was born into a better life, but to hear it so bluntly was not something she heard at all. Her mother wanted her to protect them, it was part of her dying wish, so of course she was going to do everything in her power to make sure that they stayed as safe as possible. She was tempted, but she knew this could be a trap to take her out without her putting up a fight in the moment of surprise. "I may not know what it means to work my way up from the bottom, but I do know that being raised as thieves will come to hurt those two in the end. They are innocent kids that have a hard life, and I want them to escape from that kind of life. You are no doubt a good sister to them, and I am not asking you to give them to me. That is why I have an offer for you," Sears X stated with a stern appearance that seemed to be a rare thing on his face when in private company. He didn't want kids to be punished because of how they were raised, and if he was honest with himself, he had some selfish reasons for this as well. Nekosho were the most powerful breed of Nekomata, and while Nekomata had the potential for senjutsu and yujutsu, the Nekosho had the potential to completely master yujutsu and senjutsu. The Nekosho were a high-level Yukai species, and even in his long life these three were the only ones that he had ever seen. They were just that rare, and they were a mostly female race. Finding a male Nekosho was something that he couldn't simply pass up. If a normal female Nekosho was worth 10 castles worth of treasure, then the male of the species was easily 10 times that much. Kaneko frowned again hearing this, even if it would be true. Senjutsu masters had the potential to also harness their own Tuki, and with that Tuki they could enhance their speed, strength, and durability to amazing levels. The fact that they were also able to naturally use chakra, an energy that had a small amount of light properties, made them dangerous to devils. Not to mention that in theory a Nekosho that was turned into a Nekosho devil hybrid would be able to have a high resistance to light-based abilities. "An offer NYA?" Koka asked in surprise. This was something she hadn't seen coming. Graphia was looking at her beloved with an expression of confusion as well. She had only been aware of him wanting to get their money back. Rias was now smiling, thinking of having new friends and new powerful pieces. She then paused and glanced at a frowning Kaneko. She knew what she was before she became her rook. She did not know much about Kaneko's past, even her own name, before she helped the girl and gave her a new name as a sign of friendship. Could this be Yes, if you agree to these conditions, then I promise that you and your family will be able to live a life of relative comfort. You won't have to worry about being attacked randomly, and you shall have a bed to sleep in each night. Sears tempted lightly, while the idea started to tempt Koka even further. This was starting to sound too good to be true. As far as she knew, no devil was kind enough to offer others something without something in return. Somebody from the Grimoire family should be no different, no matter how nice the family was rumored to be. They were devils after all. Rias' pouts here slightly muffled. While she could understand Koka's worry and point, she felt her family pride being challenged. Even if she was biased. What is the catch, Nya? Koka asked with her arms crossed under her impressive rack, and Sears nodded slightly at how she wasn't falling for how tempting he was trying to make the offer seem. Simple, you will work under the Grimoire family as out personal spy. You will be sent out on missions when we ask, and you will be expected to remain a mystery. That means that if you are caught, the Grimoire will deny ever having anything to do with you. My family will cut all ties with you. The second thing is that I would like for your siblings to become a part of my Rias Tan's peerage when she gets her evil piece set. Sears stated with a small smile on his face. Getting Rias 2 potentially amazing pieces would be an amazing gift for her birthday, not to mention the fact that the family wouldn't have to steal anymore, unless Koka was ordered to do that. The 2 children would get a friend that was only 2 years older than them, and Rias would get 2 rare friends, servants, pets, depending on how she saw them. Kaneko looked up at Rias, who was smiling kindly at her. Kiba looked between them, trying to understand why, while Akeno was focused on the book. Koka was torn between choosing her own desire for a free life, or the safety and happiness of her younger siblings. She could trade away all of their freedom for a happy life that wouldn't be completely filled with danger, or she could tell Sears to stick his offer up his ass and potentially damn them all in the future. They were Nekosho, a near-extinct species of Nekomata. They were most likely the last of their kind, and if they died out, then that was it for their race. Not to mention, if something happened to her, then nobody would be there for her precious siblings. It was a gamble. She could do this and make sure her family was safe, or toss the offer away and throw away this chance of safety. The choice was obvious, but she just didn't want to make it. She had sworn on her mother's unmarked grave that she would protect her siblings no matter the cost to herself. She said unmarked, because if anyone discovered that the grave held a Nekosho in it, they would break it. It was easier to have the location memorized, than to rebuild it every time they went to visit. Naruto-chan, Sharon-chan, forgive me for what I am going to do. Koka thought in her mind as she took a breath to calm herself. With determination in her eyes, and a heart that was prepared for her siblings' anger, she gazed at the devils and decided upon her answer. She was placing everything on the line with her choice. She hoped that her mother could forgive her. Rias smiled at Kaneko, who looked down. She knew what would happen next. Her friends would know about her true nature and her past, even if it was different. She, however, also knew her friends have their own secrets and knew they would not shun her. Besides, she was actually looking forward on seeing how her family lives would become better now. Let me get this straight. You want me to betray my cute little siblings' trust just so that your little brat will get 2 rare pets, Nya? Koka asked with narrowed eyes towards Sears. Akeno giggled at what Rias was called, while Rias gained a slight twitch in her eyebrow. Her answer would completely depend on how he answered her, and if it was a good answer, then she wouldn't mind allowing her siblings to join this girl's peerage. If the answer was bad, she would completely reject the offer and tell him to stuff it up his ass. Grafia was looked between the siblings with a cautious gaze, making sure to keep her eye on the sleeping siblings just in case they woke up. Oh. You misunderstand. You see, if I just took your family in, then there would be many political responses to this. You see, my little Rias Tan doesn't really have any friends in her general age group, and I think the same could be said for your little ones. Rias blinked, hearing she had no friends. Maybe this is before I met you, Akeno. Her queen thought about it. It would make sense, as they are around 5 and you would still be quite young. If they become hers, then they would automatically get the protection of the Grimoire family. You will be paid for your services, and it isn't like they will be treated badly. You can see them anytime you want to, but they will belong to Rias. I just thought it was sad that the last family of Nekosho had a bad life, and this is an offer that benefits us both. Sears said with his hands waving in a way to keep her cool. Yes, he wanted to give the twins to Rias as a gift that would one day become powerful servants, but it wasn't like this was a completely selfish desire of his. It does sound like it, and pretty much any other devil it would be that way, Akeno said thinking about it. He figured that the twins would be able to play with Rias, and as they grew up together they would be less likely to be seen as servants. They would be like family to Rias, because the Grimoire in her was strong. She would just love to have two little friends to play with, and watch anime with. Yeah, he blamed himself for that one. He brought her back one DVD of Sailor Moon, and then his little sister starts her road to becoming an otaku. The others blinked here. Rias was sure she was not an otaku, even if she liked some anime humans came up with. Akeno giggled imagining what Rias would be like as an otaku. Oh, I hope we would be able to see a picture of it or an extreme example. Kaneko and Kiba shook their heads as they cannot see it. I will be paid NYA. And they won't be hurt. Kuroka asked with a quick glance at her siblings. She wasn't as worried about Naruto getting hurt, because he was a tough little guy. He could take as much punishment as he possible could and then come back for more. Those times she watched him secretly train with that strange Yujutsu of his proved that he could take a hit when his own moves backfired on him. Not to mention he had an amazing healing factor, and a very high amount of chakra in his body. Kiba whistled, must be because of his reincarnation. I don't see any other reason he could be as strong. Makes sense, Rias added, but she was excited. If Naruto was already this strong then we should have a good member for her peerage. Kaneko agreed, but she was worried. She feared for her brother would try and train in senjutsu and what could happen if he went mad like her sister. Sharon on the other hand wasn't nearly as strong, but she seemed to have an amazing ability when it came to learning. She didn't want them getting hurt, but either way avoiding pain was impossible. They will be hurt eventually. If they were to join her peerage, then they would no doubt go through a raiding game. If they were to do that, then they would get hurt. It is very rare for anyone to die in a raiding game though, and a great team of medics is usually there to take care of injuries. Can you say they won't be hurt by the people that placed a price on your head, Kuroka the Black Hellcat? Or how about Demon Cat Kuroka, because eventually people will come after them to get to you? Sears stated in a matter-of-fact voice, while Kuroka winced. Already she has a bit of reputation. Rias muttered, seeing how that changed. Unless she already had that nickname before becoming a devil. She had a lot of enemies that would just love to get their hands on her siblings and do unspeakable things to them if it meant hurting her. Almost nobody among her enemies would dare mess with one of the still standing 72 pillar families. Doing that was akin to suicide in most cases, and messing with the Grimoire was something even she wouldn't do. The Grimoire was the family that had managed to gain the Bale clan's power of destruction, and in this family were two confirmed users of this power. The mother of the two children, and the man standing in front of her. One of the four Satans and the one that was considered to be one of the most powerful ones. Then there was his wife, somebody that was nearly on par with a Satan-class devil. After that was the fact that the Grimoire family were allied with the Citri family, and if you messed with the Grimoire you were messing with the Bale. The Bale were considered the most powerful family in the underworld. Not to mention that the Citri family also had a Satan in it in the form of Seraphal Leviathan. In the end, it was a very poor choice to mess with the Grimoire. That was akin to taking on three Satan-class level devils, the Grimoire family, the Citri family, the Bale family, the power of destruction, as well as any secret weapons they had that weren't well known. When you think about it, you really don't want to mess with your family. Kiba said, to which Rias nodded, knowing this fact. Basically, only those with death wishes or those that were sure of victory would even dare to take on the Grimoire with how much backup they had. Think carefully, Kuroka-san, or you may make a choice you will regret. With the backing of the Grimoire, your siblings will have better lives. One day if they ascend through the ranks they can own their own land, and will be able to gain political power that a Nekosho has never had before. Can you really hold them back from getting a good live because you don't agree with the methods, or you want to selfishly keep them to yourself? Graphia questioned with narrowed eyes as she gave Kuroka a bone-chilling look that sent guilt right to the depths of her soul. The way they were talking was making her feel like she was the bad guy for wanting to keep her siblings to herself. If they were speaking the truth, and her abilities were saying they were, then Sharon and Naruto would be much better off living at the Grimoire Castle. They could have a great life, and one day they could gain a greater amount of freedom despite the fact they were going to be pretty much slaves for a while. Kaneko was quite thinking, she would not deny her life is better with Rias and she did not have to worry about anything. While she knew this, she was not sure how this version of her will take it. Hearing the argument made sense to her, but this version was only 5 and might not take it as well. Nekosho lived bad lives because of the danger devils considered them, but if they gained a high status then they would be proving that Nekosho meant devils no harm. Their race would thrive, and be reborn once more. They would be better than ever, and that was her ultimate goal in life. She wanted the Nekosho to flourish again, and despite the trade-off being her freedom, this was a great way to get started on her goal. Okay, but, if they are mistreated you better expect me to take my pound of flesh nya. Koka threatened the two, before Sears nodded. If anyone ever hurt Rias he would be very much the same way, so he could understand exactly where she was coming from. Rias pouts here but did not deny that her brother was a bit overprotective of her and would go after anyone that hurt her. She just sometimes wishes he would not make things so embarrassing for her. Maybe this is what Sona feels like with her sister. The burden of being an older sibling was one that should not be taken lightly, nor looked down upon. It was a very demanding job, and both elder siblings took it very seriously, for different reasons. Koka promised her mother that she would look after them, while Sears didn't know the hardships of truly having to raise his sibling. Very well then, that is great news, but is there anything I can do for you to seal the deal? Sears asked one final thing before the deal was sealed, and Koka instantly knew the answer to that. It was the one thing that he could do that she would sell her very soul for, besides her siblings' lives, and it was something she couldn't do on her own. What is it? Akeno asked, excited about the story so far. While no one was in pain yet it did not mean it was bad to her. Let me read and we'll see, Kiba said before he went on. 1 week later. Eureka the white cat, a loving mother, a great cat, and a selfless soul. Kaneko was still hearing this. While the others knew this was the mother to the heroes, Kaneko had to force to tears from forming in her eyes. Koka stood in front of her mother's new grave that was located in the Grimoire graveyard, a place that her gravestone wouldn't be destroyed. With this she had finally been able to give her mother a proper send-off that was fitting of such a great woman that had died bring 2 children into this world. Koka was wearing a black hooded robe over her normal clothes, and it was in the middle of the night. Naruto-chan, Koka started as she addressed her siblings while standing next to them. Instead of the scraps of clothes they had been wearing before, now they wore real clothes. Naruto was wearing a simple t-shirt and shorts, while Sharon wore a small yellow dress. She didn't get to finish her sentence though when she felt Sharon give her a now neutral look that spoke volumes of how annoyed she was at her elder sister. Someone's in trouble, Akeno said in a sing-song voice. Kiba paused as the description of how the younger sister acted. He glanced at Kaneko for a second, seeing similarities between the two. Could it be? Kiba wondered for a second before going back to reading. That isn't my name anymore, I lost that name when you sold my life away. The group winced here at the truthful statement. The girl that had abandoned her name said with a heated tone, something that Koka couldn't help but wince at. The girl that was formerly named Sharon had taken the news that they would soon be little more than playthings for a girl pretty hard. Her once expressive face had lost almost all emotion, and it was clear that she was not happy with Koka. This was something that she also couldn't fault her little sister one, because she would be angry if her freedom was sold away as well. Kaneko could agree with her other self with that her point of view somewhat. But she went through an even more horrible event, so she might have preferred the way the story was going. Oni-chan, I am not mad at you nya. Naruto said after a few moments as he rubbed his arm, and she smiled at him softly. She could always count on Naruto to look on the bright side of things. No matter how horrible life had been, he would always smile and act like nothing was wrong. He wasn't even hiding his emotions, it was like he had lived a previous life before now, and in that life he had gained a complete mastery of his anger. It was something that she knew would come in handy when his body was strong enough to handle the strain of senjutsu. Well, he is reincarnated, so it might not be that far off. Rias said while Kaneko was still nervous at her brother, even if he is not her brother here when he trains in senjutsu. Akeno found it amusing how he does not get down by anything. She hoped her counterpart found a way to make him scream. Have you met with that Rias girl yet Nya? Kuroka asked with a slightly sad look, before she smiled when Naruto smiled and started to nod just like his childish nature told him to. Ooh, she is really nice, but a little weird Nya. I thought devils were supposed to be upper meanies, but she was really nice. Rias pouts, I know devils are seen that way but really. Akeno giggled. He has high expectation for you then. Too bad he was disappointed. I really like her pretty hair Nya. Naruto said after a moment when he remembered the girl's extremely deep shade of red hair. He didn't know why, but he really liked unique hair colors like that. Rias blinked here. Sure, she was called pretty among other things, but her hair was not the first thing mentioned. It was third or fourth at least. She then noticed Kiba stopped reading and looked stunned. Kaneko had a feeling what it was about but said nothing. Rias raised a brow. Kiba, what's wrong? Kiba looked from her to Kaneko, who nodded slightly and nearly unnoticeable. He sighed before he read the next sentence. She named me Kaneko. Rias and Akeno were stunned. Rias knew what her rook was before she became a devil, but her past before that was unclear to her. Rias helped Kaneko recover from her traumatized state when she came to her care. She given her friend her name as she never gotten it. Akeno looked at Kaneko. Kaneko. Said girl looked down before her cat ears and tail appeared. It's true. Kiba said nothing. While this was shocking, he knew it changed nothing. Anything else all this did was help him connect to her. Akeno smiled. Odd as the little kitty she stopped by a harsh, even by her standards, from Kaneko. Rias cleared her throat, getting Akeno to stop before she started again. While we learn something important, this means nothing. Kaneko is still the Kaneko we all know and love. This version simply has an early start in being our friends and has a great brother. Kaneko stared at her king and nodded. Rias smiled, knowing everything would be fine with Kaneko. She nodded to Kiba to get him to read again. The now renamed Kaneko said without emotion, and once more Kuroka winced. She had been the person to give Kaneko the name Sharon, so to hear that the name she had gifted her sister with had been replaced was a serious blow to her. She had to admit that the name really fit her though. Kaneko and Rias nodded together as they agreed with this. She doesn't put Nya at the end of her sentences anymore. She must really be angry at me. Kuroka thought sadly, before she felt like slapping herself when she saw Naruto's face fall as well. She didn't know why, but Naruto was very sensitive to people's negative emotions. If she felt sad, then that sadness would in turn affect Naruto. She had no clue why, but he seemed to have some very strange abilities that would seem to randomly pop up sometimes. She was even more surprised that he didn't seem to notice that anything was wrong with him, so she didn't bother bringing it up. Rias-chan says that she is getting her evil peace thingy next year's, and we can join her peerage then Nya. Naruto explained with a light smile on his face when he noticed that Kuroka had cheered herself up. Kuroka was actually happy that her siblings had almost a whole year before they would become a part of Rias' peerage. So this is before I met Akeno then. Rias thought as she got a better glimpse at a timeline. Akeno giggled, thinking how a small Naruto trying to pronounce peerage was cute. She just wanted to hug him so hard it starts crying in pain. Kuroka watched as Kaneko suddenly started to walk away with Naruto following after her and talking to her about everything and nothing at the same time. Kuroka looked at her mother's new grave before a tear fell down her cheek. She could never say how sorry she was for what she did, and she could only hope that her mother would forgive her. Kaneko was quite here as she had a moment for her deceased mother. The others felt the mood and was quite as well. Kiba marked the book before closing it. He slowly held it out to Kaneko. Kaneko, would you like to read? Akeno could not help my giggle here. Era, it looks like I come into the picture now. Maybe with Naruto and Kaneko being there we can become great friends. I know their screams will be nice to hear. Pity we can't hear the voices. Kiba and Rias gave her deadpan looks like Kaneko ignored her as she started. It had been 5 years since Naruto and the newly named Kaneko had been given a home at the Grimoire Castle. These 5 years had been good for the small children of now 10 years old. They were well fed, and their owner was truly a very nice girl. Both Naruto and Kaneko still got along very well with each other, but Kaneko only ever got mad at Naruto when he brought up that she should try and forgive Kuroka. Kaneko was very stubborn on the fact that Kuroka was in the wrong by selling them away, while Naruto didn't really care. Kaneko gave a slight pause hearing this. She did not know what to think concerning her sister with what she did. Part of her was happy her sister did not cause her the trauma she knew before Rias, but the matter she would still be betrayed still hurt slightly. Right now though, Naruto was sitting in the garden on the Grimoire castle with one Rias Grimoire. Rias was a very young, for a devil, girl at the age of 12 years old. Her red hair was a little bit lighter than her brother's, but still being a blood red shade of crimson. Her skin was a healthy pale thanks to her heritage, and she could pass off for an English woman thanks to her skin color. Her eyes were a warm green color that Naruto found just as pretty as her hair. Rias could not help but giggle here while Kaneko frowned, feeling a strange feeling she did not know. And finally, as the daughter of a Grimoire and a Bale, she had inherited the power of destruction just like her elder brother. Right now though, she was wearing a black dress that went down to her thighs, and her growing breasts were pressed up against the back of Naruto's head. "Aw, so cute, Akeno-kun, keeping him in your lap like a teddy bear. The fact he is pressed into your breast makes all cuter. Maybe play with him a little, making him think perverted thoughts." Rias sighed, "Enough, Akeno. Beside, I doubt they would do anything. And the fact my breasts are against his head is more size difference than anything else." Akeno just giggled as Kaneko went on. This was their favorite bonding activity to do together. Naruto would sit in Rias' lap and use a small watering can to water their own little garden while she would just enjoy holding her friend. Rias' happy personality would spread and make Naruto's own mood much happier, because with his growing empathy abilities he was now not only sensing negative emotions, but also positive ones. It was a blessing just as much as it was a curse, because if Naruto was around a large group of people feeling negative emotions, then he could get physically sick from the overexposure to negativity. He was also personally influenced by heavy or strong emotions, which was why he liked to stay around Kaneko or Rias. Kaneko had a small amount of emotion in her, and she was his sister, so he didn't get much feedback from her. Rias was just usually a happy person, so he liked being around her happiness. "Hey Naruto-kun, a few days ago I found a girl that I wanted to make a part of my peerage. Right now she is being moved into a room at the Grimoire castle. I think you and Kaneko-chan will really like her," Rias informed Naruto while running her hand through his spiky locks of white hair. Naruto and Kaneko had both been made a part of her peerage a few years back, and frankly she was surprised to learn that Naruto took a very powerful piece just to turn him into a member of her peerage. Rias blinked. "Really? Akeno was quite as well. I assume he took a rook like his sister or a bishop. What piece would make him seem so powerful?" Kaneko had an idea but read on keeping it to herself. The evil piece system was designed much like the game of chess. There was the king of each peerage, in this case that was Rias. "Wait, we already know this," Kiba said, "can't we skip this part?" Rias sighed, "I am sure it is not long. Besides, something could be snuck in there, so we might as well get everything." The others sat there bored as Kaneko explained that they already knew. From there you had a single queen piece, 2 rooks, 2 bishops, 2 knights, and 8 pawns. That was also the importance of the system. A queen piece was worth 9 pawns, a rook piece was worth 5 pawns, both bishop and knight pieces were worth 3 pawns, and finally the pawn was the lowest piece. Of course, that wasn't to say they were the weakest either. Each piece was given the ability of its chess piece, an enhancement to their abilities that would come in handy during a fight. The rook had amazing defense and strength. The bishop was granted even greater magical reserves. The knight was gifted with amazing speed. The queen was given the combined strengths of the rook, bishop, and knight. Finally, the pawn had the ability to temporarily gain a promotion to any of the higher pieces besides king. Sometimes people would take more than one piece to reincarnate into a devil, or devil-Nekosho hybrid in the cases of Naruto and Kaneko. Kaneko had taken a single rook to turn into a member of Rias' peerage. That meant that she was worth at most 5 pawns, which was a nice first addition to her peerage. Naruto on the other hand was confirmed to be more valuable than his younger sister when she was unable to turn him with any of the other pieces. Rias paid more attention here as she wondered what piece Naruto would be. She had even tried to use all 8 pawns to turn him. Finally, she learned that Naruto be turned by nothing less than her most powerful piece. Akino tilted her head. Wait, if all her pawns were no good then all that is left is. Kiba smiled at Akino's stunned look. Kaneko felt slightly smug at the fact Akino was going to be demoted. Rias came to the conclusion as well as she giggled. The queen, and as the queen of her peerage Naruto had been given all the strengths of the rook, bishop, and knight. That made him the most powerful person in the peerage besides her, or when a pawn promoted to the queen position during battle. She was curious as to what was inside him that caused him to be worth such a valuable piece, but she figured it had to do with the strange symbol that would sometimes show up on his right palm. Sadly, it would never appear long enough for anyone to get more than a passing glance at it. Akino was still stunned at the fact she would not be the queen while Kiba said well he was reincarnated and has a lot of power in the form of a sacred gear so it is understandable. But then what will I become? Akino asked quietly. Rias pat her friend on her shoulder. I am sure we will find a nice new evil piece for you. Akino stared at her king. You're joking, right? You can't take the queen piece away and demote me. Can you even demote a devil with an evil piece? Rias giggled seeing her reaction all too funny. She doubted they would be able to replace Akino's piece and even if they could she would not let that happen. Is she the person I felt coming into the castle Nya? What piece are you going to use for her? Naruto wondered out loud for a second, not really caring to stop using his verbal tick. He didn't know why, but he felt like as a person he should always have a verbal tick. It just felt right to him to have a verbal tick, but that was beside the point. Rias was glad he did not stop as she did find the tick very cute. Kiba raised a brow. Why do I have the feeling that Naruto had a tick in his first life? Naruto had indeed felt a source of some negative emotion, and at the same time positive emotion come into the castle that he hadn't felt before. If he had to describe each person based on their usual emotions then Rias felt like a warm sandy beach, Searsex felt like a calm moonlight, Kuroka felt like a happy cat, Kaneko had no real feeling to her most of the time, Lord Gremory and Lady Gremory had a warm, cold thing going on with them, Graphia hadn't been around lately so he forgot what she felt like. There were many other people and servant, but he still knew each of them. This person felt more like the flavor he got when Rias got him a sour apple soda. It was both sweet and sour at the same time, but with a light focus on the sweet, but what you noticed more was the sour. It was like a person that both liked to inflict pain, and feel pain at the same time. It confused him greatly. Akino started to get out of herself shock hearing this. She giggled, that's me alright. I love to give pain lots of times and to get pain other times. Funny how you always seem to be on S mode, for S&M, Rias deadpan at her friend. Akino however was in her own little fantasy and did not hear Rias. I don't really know, but I was thinking of either using my mutated bishop or using as many pawns as it will take. If she can promote during battle then she can become a queen or another piece, and the more pawns it takes the more of a base stat boost she will get depending on how many it takes to turn her. With the mutated bishop pieces though she will get a very high amount of magical power. Rias mused to Naruto and herself as she considered what she was going to turn her newest friend into. She had little doubt that the bishop would be a good piece for her with what her current abilities suggested. The woman that she had come across while on a trip to the human world had an already very high amount of magical power, and she knew how to properly use it already. Yet the normal bishop wouldn't be good enough to turn her, and she wanted to save the mutated bishop for somebody with a powerful sacred gear. Rias agreed knowing Akino was too powerful for a simple bishop. But she hoped she did not use the mutated piece. If she did then she would not have Gasper in her peerage or as a friend. Mutated pieces were rare pieces that only 1 out of every 10 devils got when they were given their evil pieces. Rias got very lucky by getting one, because they could turn people that were worth a lot of pieces with just one piece. Sadly, Naruto's body had also rejected that piece for some reason. Mutated pieces weren't perfect though, because like regular evil pieces they were unable to turn gods, Buddhas, and dragon gods. Not everything was known about them either, and it was said that the boost somebody got from a mutated piece was twice as powerful as the boost from a normal evil piece. How about the rook? If you want them to use magic as their main form of battle, then that would leave them weak to physical damage. Wouldn't it be better to give them a defense, and then just have them train their magic to a high level? I mean, just because somebody is a rook doesn't mean that they can't fight with magic Nya. Naruto questioned Rias with his head tilting to the side. Akeno blinked her and she was not the only one. A rook. Me. Rias hummed as she went over what Naruto said. Well, Naruto makes sense, and since you can't be a queen, it is a good second option. Besides, think if it this way, you could suspires people as a rare rook that can use magic. Akeno thought about it before she giggled. Yes, I can see their faces. The shock before they get also wonderful pain. Plus as a rook I can almost as many hits as a queen, and I can also get up close to cause pain hand to hand and with magic. I would be able hear their screams and see their pain up close that way. The group sweat dropped seeing Akeno in another fantasy with a blush on her face. Kaneko ignored the queen and went back to reading. He never understood why people seemed to think that just because somebody was physically strong because they were a rook that they couldn't fight mainly with their magic. After all, you could make your magical talent grow by training with it hard enough. Rias blinked in surprise at not thinking of that before this point, but she had to admit that it would be a very good tactic for the element of surprise. If people got used to somebody only using magic to fight, then they would forget that somebody was physically strong. That would lead to them trying to get in close to attack, and that would be a fatal mistake when you learned that they were just as strong as they were magically strong. Rias nodded to this logic and felt bad that she never thought of it before. She still had one rook, so she might be able to do that here as well. I really like that. With a rook being worth 5 pawns, there is also the chance that it will be enough to turn her. Very good idea, Naruto-kun. Rias praised Naruto while she started to rub her cheek into the top of his head, and he was grinning with a peace sign at how his idea was a good one. He started to water the recently planted rose bush with his watering can, and as he began whistling he felt Kaneko close by watching them while a slight hint emotion flared for a moment too brief for it to register to him. At first she had gotten rid of her emotions because of how betrayed she felt when she learned that Koka sold them, but now she kept her emotions away because this was her way of protecting Naruto from being forced into feeling her emotions. Kaneko stared at the passage wondering what that meant before she read on. She thought that if she didn't visibly show her emotions then Naruto wouldn't be affected by them, which was somewhat true. It was easier for him to feel emotions that people were showing, but it was almost impossible to truly hide them from him. That was why it was almost impossible to get the drop on Naruto, because he could sense everyone's emotions if they were around him. You might be able to hide your energy signature from him, but if you felt even the slightest bit of emotion while in his range then he would know you were there. You foo, so this is the boy queen you mentioned, eh? A feminine voice called out from behind them, and while Naruto wasn't surprised by the sudden arrival, he had felt her coming. Rias almost jumped when she heard that laughing. Naruto hopped out of Rias' lap, before he turned around to see who it was while Rias dusted herself off. Naruto was able to get a good look at the person in this time, and he had to admit that like Rias she was pretty. Akeno smiled. He is such a flatter. But boy queen. Not bad, but I think I can think of something better than that. The person that had entered the garden was a young female around Rias' age with long black hair that she had kept up in a ponytail that was wrapped with an orange ribbon, much to his joy. By long hair he felt long, because you could see that even in a ponytail her hair went down to her knees. She was wearing traditional shrine maiden clothes that showed that she was already well developed in the chest area, and her skin was paler than Rias it would seem. Her eyes were a seductive shade of purple for some reason, and he could see that she was the kind of person that liked to tease others. This boy queen is called Naruto. What's your name, Nya? Naruto asked with a friendly gesture of introducing himself first. The girl didn't get to answer because Rias decided that it was her job to introduce members of her peerage to each other. She would get Akeno and Kaneko to meet each other later when Kaneko was willing to talk to Akeno. She had a hard time warming up to people after all. Akeno sighed. Yes, you were like that, Kaneko. But still this brother will be so much fun to tease as well. Kaneko gave a slight glare before reading. This is Akeno Himehime, and she wants to become a member of my peerage. I met her in the human world during my latest trip there. Akeno, this is the queen of my peerage Naruto, which makes him the second in command when I am unable to order commands. I hope the two of you can get along. Rias said while grabbing Naruto's hand and pulling him towards Akeno, and then she grabbed Akeno's hand and forced the two of them to shake hands. Naruto smiled while shaking hands, but then he felt a really brief sour feeling coming from Akeno when a small grin spread across her face. Oh, he and I can get along really well. Akino commented with a sensual lick of her lips, and Naruto looked away from her while letting go of her hand. Her teasing had gotten to him, mostly because he was only used to his older sister teasing him. Sadly, Koka had been on a secret mission for the last year, and he had not seen her in a while. Rias blinked, remembering the deal her brother made with Koka. I wonder what she is doing for him. Kaneko paused, hearing more of her sister. It has been years and she tried to forget about her and the pain she caused. It hear her so often will be hard to Kaneko. Maybe Rias won't mind her sleeping in her bed with her if it was too much to sleep tonight. He moved behind Rias so that he couldn't see Akino and get teased more, while she covered her mouth with her hand and giggled again at the first teasing. Rias summoned her remaining rook piece and held it in front of Akino. So Akino, how would you like to become the second rook of Rias Gremory? Rias requested with a small smile on her face, and Akino nodded lightly with her smile showing what she was truly feeling on the inside. Naruto smiled behind Rias with the back of his head pressing against her back, and his tail wrapping around her leg. The peerage of Rias Gremory had grown from 2 to 3. Kaneko closed the book, happy it was over. Akino pouts here, still slightly upset she would no longer be queen. But the ideas she kept getting was starting to make up for it. She grabbed the book from Kaneko. My turn. I want to read and see what kind of pain I get to cause. I hope Naruto has a nice scream. Pity I won't be able to hear them. Naruto sighed as he sat in the middle of a group of girls that just wouldn't leave him alone, not that he really minded the attention that much. This was actually a good thing because many of these girls around him called him cute and brought him sweets. So in the end he would act nice and polite to the girls, not that he had a choice with the fact that Rias was making him come to this place 5 days a week. In the past 5 years since Naruto had met Akino, a lot had happened to the Gremory group, as they had been nicknamed for some reason. The first thing that could be pointed out was the fact that Rias had gotten 2 more members of her peerage to join up, both of which had no choice in the matter with how they were either dead or on the verge of death when she found them. Now she had a knight and a person that she used her mutated bishop on. Rias smiled sadly, thinking of her friend Gasper. Kiba smiled as he was finally in the story. The first had been Rias' new knight Yuto Kiba, who she personally named. He was a taller blonde male with gray eyes and light skin, mostly because he was born in the West. Rias had found him dying in the snow for some reason that he wouldn't go into. She had really scored when she got him for the reason that he was a human that was born with a very unique power. Yuto had not just 1, but 2 sacred gears in his body. One was the ability to create demon swords thanks to the sacred gear sword Birth, and the other could create holy swords thanks to the sacred gear blade blacksmith. With his speed boost thanks to him being a knight, his sword abilities would be greatly enhanced. A real treasure for any peerage if you could train him correctly. Kiba sighed hearing this, as it felt a bit redundant, but said nothing. The second addition was a young Dhampir, who was born of a human mother and vampire father, named Gasper Vladi. He was a special breed of vampire that was able to walk in the sunlight, known as a day walker. That alone made him a great ally to have in Naruto's opinion, and because he was half human he had been blessed with the gift of being born with a sacred gear inside his body that was known as the Forbidden Balur View, and with it Gasper is able to freeze time on anything he can see. The only exceptions are people with enough power to resist it. Sadly, Gasper had some faults to him as well. He was very cowardly, and pretty much a shut-in most of the time. Not to mention that Gasper was a very girly boy, going so far as to wear girls' clothes instead of boys' clothes. Surprisingly, most of the time it was impossible to tell Gasper wasn't a girl, with only his important part showing that he was a boy. The group smiled thinking of their friend and felt bad, as they were sure he would have loved this story as well. Gasper also had only a small amount of control over his sacred gear, but he had been getting much better lately thanks to Naruto's help in working with him. Rias blinked before she leaned closer, hoping to hear a way to help her friend. Kiba and Kaneko listened, hoping to find a way to help as well. It was rather funny to see Naruto training the taller, but still short, boy in how to control his sacred gear by blowing bubbles and making him stop time on them. Gasper had just enough control over his sacred gear at this point that he had barely been allowed to roam around freely, because once he had been threatened to be sealed away if he couldn't gain control over his sacred gear. Rias gasped as tears come from her eyes. Gasper can learn to have control. She vows to work harder to help Gasper so he can be here with them. If the Gasper in this timeline can do it, so can hers. My head hurts, Naruto thought as he opened his mouth and sighed. Right now Naruto was located in the one place that was filled with so much emotion that a person his age would go crazy if they had his abilities. Yes, right now Naruto was going to school just like Rias and the rest of her peerage. His emotion-sensing powers had only grown more powerful as he grew older, and now he was stuck in a place that had hundreds of emotions running around it at once. Naruto closed his eyes and brought his ability to the back of his mind so that he could try and hold back the river of emotions from everywhere around him. Open up, Naruto-kun, I made this chocolate myself. One of the girls that he was surrounded by said, and with his eyes closed he opened his mouth and allowed himself to be fed a small ball of chocolate by the girl. Kaneko pouts here. Not only is her brother being fed sweets but also by girls that no doubt want to keep him for themselves. He heard the entire group giggle as he chewed on the sweet ball, and all of a sudden he felt a rush of happiness hit him like a tidal wave. Deep in his gut he felt a rush of happiness, and he himself was forced into feeling happy as well thanks to this. This was part of the negative aspect of his ability, he was directly affected by the emotions he was getting. Powerful emotions affected him more, and he could resist other emotions that came from weaker sources. Akeno raised a brow, then why doesn't he just turn it off? Maybe he can't. Kiba suggested, not really sure. This wouldn't be a problem most of the time, but that was for people that could turn their ability off. Naruto could not turn his ability off no matter how much he wanted to or tried to. He could feel hundreds of people's emotions at all times, and when he was personally close to somebody he was even more affected by their emotions. If he was in contact with somebody he would also be able to feel it much stronger than before. The only saving grace was that if he was in contact with somebody, their emotions would help block out other girls' emotions. That was he tried to be in contact with at least one person whenever he was at school. Otherwise his head would be swirling with hundreds of emotions that were not his own. Wow, sucks to have that, Kiba added, not sure what else to say. Akeno was smiling thinking of how much pain Naruto could be in with so many emotions. She was sure her counterpart convinced Rias to have him go to class for this very reason. I wonder whose lap I am sitting on today. Naruto wondered as a different girl tried to feed him a chocolate ball as well, and in the distance he could feel three extremely jealous people. Naruto opened his eye and tilted his head back so that he could see whose lap he was sitting on during lunch today. Naruto felt his head rest between the girl's breasts, and he blushed very softly at how soft they were when they were touching his head. Anyway, with that the three jealous spikes grew by 10 times, but he tried to ignore it as he looked at the girl's face. The girl that he was sitting on today was a member of the Kendo club it would seem, and if he remember right then her name was Murayama. She was a girl with brown hair that she kept in 2 ponytails at the back of her head, and brown bangs framing her face without covering her warm yellowish-brown eyes. Her body was well developed for a human girl, being on the more attractive end of the scale. She wasn't even fazed by the fact his head was nuzzled between her breasts, all she seemed to care about was that she wanted to have her arms around his stomach at all times. As a member of the Kendo club her body was very well fit, which made her even more beautiful instead of those diet girls that barely ate. Rias focused on the girl mentioned thinking, the way Naruto described her seems like he knows her very well. If that chapter has anything to go by, that means she could be a pawn I can use. I heard you like fish, so how about some of my home-cooked catfish? The second girl of the group said as she used a small fork to move some fired fish towards his lips. This second girl in the group of 3 girls, today, said as she fed him a fork of fried fish. Naruto looked over her again as he started to chew on the fish, and after the sweetness of the chocolate he had to admit the fish tasted great. This second girl was the other member of the Kendo club that had the best body, and she was Katase. A girl with very light brown hair that seemed to be tinted red, and she was the one that had paler skin and reddish-brown eyes. She was smaller than her friend all around, including the chest area. Her most notable trait was her short hair that she had held out of her face to show off her forehead. Rias smiled slightly at the sound of another pawn for her. Naruto swallowed the fish, and decided that if they were going to feed him then he may as well show his appreciation by showing them the cute side they liked seeing. It tasted yummy, I love how you fried it, Katase-san nya. Naruto said with a wide smile, and the girl's face couldn't stay straight before she lunged and hugged his neck while his face landed into her bosom while the back of his head was still in Murayama's chest. Kaniko's eye twitched at this. How dare those girls do that to her brother? Stupid perverted girls. Oh. You are just so cute, Naruto-kun. You can call me Katase-chan or even Oni-chan if you want. Katase nearly squealed as she gushed over Naruto, and that spike of jealousy from earlier doubled in size. Naruto could hear muffled yells from a few guys, but with his ears surrounded by boob he was unable to completely make it out before it stopped and Katase stopped hugging his face when she was pulled off by the last girl. This girl was somebody that Naruto knew by first and last name, and she was known as Tomo Meguri. Like the others, she was a second year at this school. The major differences though was that this girl was a member of the student council, and a devil. Rias giggled here as did Akino. It seems even Sona's night is taken by Naruto's charm. I wonder what she would say if she knew. Yes, this girl was a devil from the peerage of a different woman that went to this school. Tomo was a girl with shoulder-length reddish-brown hair and brown eyes. She had wind-swept bangs, and hair antenna sticking from the top of her head. She was the knight in the peerage of Sona Citri, the heir to the Citri family. The group sighed knowing this was more information they already knew. That placed her as an important devil, and strangely enough this hyperactive girl had a fetish for younger guys. She was technically the lowest rank of devil, besides the low-class pawn. She was a low-class knight, and yet she insisted on going after Naruto as a romantic interest. She liked to use lunch as a chance to get at Naruto while he couldn't escape her. She was a very nice girl, but she treated him like he was a normal person. That was both likable and annoying of her, because in both rank and status Naruto outranked her. You see, in the last 5 years Naruto had been promoted from a low-class devil to a middle-class devil, which was one rank away from being a high-class devil. Add that to the fact that he was the queen of Rias peerage and you had a middle-class queen. Of course, besides the fact that he wanted to become an ultimate class one day he didn't really think much of rank. Rias blinked hearing Naruto wishing to become an ultimate class devil. She knew some wished to become one but she never knew one before. Hey now, Naruto-kun hasn't tried the cookies I made in home economics today. Come on Naruto-kun, they are peanut butter cookies. Tomo said, and despite the fact that she was a devil she was still one of the girls that liked to feed him things during lunch. Naruto munched on the cookie while she started to pet his head, and he nodded to her in satisfaction at how enjoyment of the cookie. Naruto noticed the jealousy from earlier replace itself with depression and sadness, so opening his eyes he looked over to the direction and saw that there were 3 boys that were also well known in the school. The perverted trio were crying tears of pain as they watched a younger boy get fed and pampered by 3 beautiful women. These were the kinds of guys that were completely open with how perverted they were, which included peeping on women that were changing. Kaniko had her blank look on her face but the others could tell her dislike of those 3 already. Rias raised a brow as she has heard of them but she never met them before. Hey Katase-chan, Murayama-chan, and Tomo-chan, why don't invite them over to eat lunch with us? They look like they were pretty lonely nya. Naruto offered in a way to make the people that were bringing down his good mood happy. Frankly, Naruto always tried to make people happy so that he would have to feel their bad emotions. Kaniko felt that her brother was being too nice as she did not want those 3 perverts to infect her brother with anything. The girls' face darkened right away when they looked to see who Naruto was talking about, while the boys were looking at Naruto like he was their savior or something. You would be better not to let their filthy perverse thoughts infect you with whatever diseases they have Naruto-kun. Those are the perverted trio of idiots. They peep on girls and read porn in class. Katase stated as she and her kendo friend sent death glares at the 3 boys, who now had their heads down on the ground again. Naruto closed his eyes, before he opened them again and used his own silver hair and yellow eye combination to make himself seem even more like a pouting kitten. But if you protect me then I won't get infected. Naruto pleaded lightly, seeing as perverts didn't really bother him that much, he was going to have to punish himself for using his cuteness to get his way, but that could come later. Now that is playing dirty, Kiba muttered knowing those girls, even the one that is a real devil, would not be able to resist that cute look. The girls, even Tomo, completely fell under his charm and blushed deeply as his charm caught them all deeply in his trap. Hey you perverts, you can eat lunch over here, but try anything and you won't live to see tomorrow. Murayama shouted at the trio, and like lightning they started to run over to the group sitting on the grass and started bowing down to Naruto. Kaneko pouts at the fact those three were close to her brother. But she had a feeling they would screw it up all on their own. Akeno giggled at the fact they were bowing to Naruto. Maybe if I play it right I can have them bow to me. Then I can have three very eager pets to play and cause pain too. Someone in the academy a certain trio sneezed and felt a great pleasure go through their bodies. Maybe a not girl wishes to sleep with us. The three turned back to their peephole to peep on the kendo club but found them missing. They were confused until they were grabbed from behind. The sneeze from before alerted the girls to the perverts and now they were seeking payback. Akeno paused in her reading as she felt that someone somewhere was getting a large amount of pain, and she was no way to enjoy it. She pouts before reading off again. They uttered thanks to Naruto, before they looked up and started to show him that they were now crying tears of joy. Naruto was able to see that each of them were pretty average in the looks department, besides the middle one that was slightly above his two friends in look. Matsuda, the perverted baldy and sexual harassment paparazzi of the group was a bald boy with tanned skin that kept his eyes closed most of the time. He was once a part of the sports team, and had been a star player before the calling of the pervert got to him. He was the lolicon of the group. Motohama, the perverted glasses and 3 sizes scouter was a boy that wore glasses and had shaggy brown hair. He was rumored to be able to tell a girl's 3 sizes just by looking at them, which was an impressive skill. Naruto himself could tell a girl's 3 sizes if they placed them on his head. He can. Rias asked while Kaneko eye twitched at this bit of information. For example, Murayama's 3 sizes were B84W70H81 all in centimeters, and Kata's 3 sizes were B78. 5W65H79 also in centimeters. He never told anyone about this talent besides Kaneko, Akeno, and Rias because over the years they had been using his head to find out what their new bra sizes were over the years, and seriously, both Rias and Akeno had gained bombastic bodies in the past 5 years. Akeno sighed, we need someone who can do that. It would save us on trying bras. Rias nodded as it would save them time and trouble. The finally member, and presumed leader, of the perverted trio was Issei Hyodo. A slightly above average looking boy with hazel eyes and brown hair that stuck out in the back. His was slightly tan, but he had nothing to show that his body was fit other than the fact that he wasn't fat, showing that he didn't really exercise often. He was considered the most perverted of the trio for some reason, even though he was always the most respectful of the girls. Yes, he peeked, but at least he never admitted to raping the girls in his head like the other two. He was just unlucky in the fact that he was caught peeping more, but he never groped girls like the other two. All in all, despite his bad representative he was the most bearable of the 3 perverts. Something is off about him though. Naruto said as his eyes narrowed at Issei, and for a brief moment he was sure that he could feel something in him that also was a source of emotion. No wait, there was something inside him that had its own set of emotions. He was sure that somewhere deep inside Issei there was a sacred gear, because this boy smelled completely human. If he was possessed, or wasn't a human then Naruto would be able to smell it. That meant that the something inside him was a sacred gear. The group went wide-eyed at this. They looked at one another before focusing on the book again as Akeno went on. Issei Hyodo was a human with a sacred gear that had no affiliation with any of the other factions. This means that he was free to become a member of Rias Peerage with some convincing. Naruto blinked when he felt a spike of understanding come from Tomo, as well as a sense of urgency as well. Meaning that she had seen the look on his face, and figured out that Issei had a sacred gear as well. Rias bit her lip slightly. She knew a scared gear would be a great member to her peerage. She was only thankful that Sona did not know at the time, otherwise she would focus on making Issei her pawn. Not good, Sona will jump at the chance to have another sacred gear user. Naruto thought as he realized that Tomo was going to tell Sona about Issei as well. Not only would Sona be able to get in contact with Issei quicker, but Sona was also better about talking people into joining her peerage than Rias. Rias pouts cutely here. What is that supposed to mean? Her peerage member knew what Naruto was talking about but did not know how to tell her. Akino glanced down and said the book explained it better and without hassle for them. Rias depended on others to make her peerage larger, with only Akino being talked into becoming a member. Naruto and Kaneko were gifts to her, Yudo was dying, and Gasper had died as well. Frankly, she had gotten lucky with how easy she had it getting her peerage. Rias opened her mouth to defend herself before she paused when she realized the book was right. She slumped slightly as she felt useless for a moment. However, that did not last as a small fire started to burn in her eyes with determination. Akino and the other did not notice as she started again to get her king's mind off of it. Sona had scouted for her own peerage, and then she would approach them and offer them what they wanted so that they would join her. If Sona got to Issei before Rias, then his king could kiss a new member goodbye. Naruto could ruin his reputation though and run to tell her the urgent news right now, because as Rias queen she had tasked him with scouting for peerage material. For one, if he abandoned these girls without a good reason and ran away to do something that would raise questions. Questions were not something Naruto was good at answering, and if position as the scout would be in trouble if Sona found out about him. That would make his job hard, because right now he was the only one with the ability to scout out people as well thanks to his abilities. In his distraction he never noticed what the perverted trio were saying, but he did notice when Kate started to beat the hell out of them with a furious blush on her face while they tried to escape from her wrath. Akino sighed slightly at the image of the trio in pain. While she had no idea why or what they did, it did not matter to her. Kaneko just felt like justice was served and that the trio deserved it times 10. Yeah, she was not a big fan of perverts. He didn't pay very much attention to that either, thinking on how to get Issei on their side was more important. Right now Rias needed to get some serious power on her side if she wanted to defeat him in a rating game. That was part of the reason that Naruto had gotten so close to Murayama and Kate, because they had formal sword training and physically fit bodies with a good amount of stamina. He was hoping that he could get them to join up with Rias soon, because Murayama would make a great knight, while Kate was good pawn material. Even if they weren't sacred gear users, they would be very helpful in the future with what skills they already had. Heck, maybe having them both as pawns would be a good idea so that they could promote to rook, knight, or queen and gain a good boost to their already healthy bodies. Rias smiled at the idea, happy to be right while she thought about the real Murayama and Kate as the wheels turned in her head. Not to mention that they were fans of Rias and Akino already, so they would be relatively easy to get over to their side. Of course, they were a backup plan for if they didn't have enough members in time. They already had training in a form of combat, so with the increase in abilities turning into a devil would grant they would be good members even at the start of their training. Anyway, he had to tell Rias about Issei as soon as he could. Akino closed the book as the chapter ends. She then noticed the look on Rias' face. Kiba and Kaneko also noticed it. Bucho? Kiba asked. Rias smiled at her peerage members. I think I may have found 3 pawns for my peerage. The group was looking at Rias as she thought about the possibilities she was seeing. Akino then said, Rias, let's slow down for a second. Rias glanced her way. Why? You heard the last chapter. Naruto was looking for people to make my pawns and you have to agree his choices are sound. But that is that world or timeline or whatever we should call it. Akino argued. I am not the queen, Kaneko has no twin brother, and Gasper is. She paused while everyone was quiet for a moment for their friend. The point is the book shows everything different. Even if Issei has a sacred gear it might not be a good one. We cannot get ahead of ourselves before we know anything. Can't jump the gun, Kaneko added. Rias looked at them not sure. She felt that she was right but what they said made sense. Kiba then had an idea. How about we read one more chapter and see what we decided in the book? It could shed some light for us. Rias smiled and picked the book up and found the chapter. Before she started she could not help but smile at the title. Chapter 6, Pawns. Issei Hyodo ha, isn't he that infamous pervert? Rias questioned Naruto while he sat right next to his sister on the couch opposite to Rias. In the room was a pale blonde-haired boy a few inches taller than Naruto with pink eyes wearing a girl's school uniform, but he was sitting inside of a box. The group smiled hearing about Gasper and happy he was able to be with them. Sitting on Rias' left side was Yudo drinking a cup of tea provided by the resident cook and Rook Akino. Gasper was playing on some kind of video game to keep himself from freaking out at the thought of new people. Naruto knew he was a nervous guy, but his reason for not going to class was kinda bad to him. Naruto went through physical pain sometimes by going to class. The one that is the leader of the perverted trio, right? Akino questioned as well before Naruto could answer Rias' question about Issei. Kaneko was sulking lightly at not having gotten the chance to eat with Naruto today. They already had their classes separated, so lunch and when school was out was the only time they got together. Akino giggled at the fact Kaneko was getting jealous. Too bad I can't really tease her about it. It would not be as fun with no brother. Kaneko pouts, feeling for her counterpart. She knew she would want to spend time with her twin, if she had one, when they could not with different classes. Naruto placed an arm around her to comfort her, and the effect was that she started to calm down right away without Naruto even having to look at her to do it. I sensed a sacred gear inside him during lunch today, and I fear that Tomo was able to notice my reaction. If we don't hurry, then Issei will be drafted into devilhood by Sona, and you know that if she gets to him then you won't have a chance. Naruto pointed out the sense of urgency that they should be feeling at the moment. Rias pouts hearing this. While she and Sona were friends, she did not want to lose Issei to her if he had a useful sacred gear. Her pouts turned into a smile as she remembered Sona did not know any of this, both the book and the fact Issei has a sacred gear, which means she has an advantage. Rias nodded very lightly with a smile on her face, not seeming to have any worries over this matter. She had already had her eye on Issei thanks to the recent fallen angels keeping an eye on him. She just didn't have a name to put to a fact at the moment, and now that she did, she could plan around this. The others looked up at one another. Era, this could be troublesome. Akino muttered. Kiba nodded. Yes, if the fallen angels are interested in him then this could be trouble. Rias frowned before she said, yes, but this also means that he must have a powerful sacred gear at least. But if that is true here then we must proceed with caution. I will have my familiar follow Issei to see if he come in contact with any fallen angels. Closing her eyes and setting her teacup down, she leaned back and laced her fingers together. This would be a problem though if Issei was taken, but he was just one sacred gear user out of the few that have been confirmed in this school. Naruto had already given her the names of those two that he had believed would make good pawns for her peerage, so even if they lost Issei they would still get two very good pawns that had training before becoming devils. Rias paid more attention here despite already reading it before her. She was determined to commit this to memory if it was important. If Sona got Issei, then not only would she had to work on motivating him, but she would also need to work on his base stats, hand-to-hand, and all the other aspects of being a devil. In the end, she had a few aces in the hole for if Sona did get to Issei. Thankfully though, she already had a plan for getting to Issei. His nature as a pervert would be easy for her to play on, and it wasn't like she was a modest person with showing off her body. Yes, getting a pervert into her peerage would be as easy as tricking a child. Kaneko scowled slightly knowing this was not going to be pleasant with a pervert as part of their group. Yuto and Kaneko, would you two please go get Issei before he leaves the school grounds? Rias asked with a sweet tone to her voice, and the blue eyes boy nodded with a small smile on his face. Kaneko huffed lightly, before she stood up with a nod like Yuto. If fallen angels were after Issei, then it would be best that they don't go alone if they were going after him. I will do that right away, Bucho. Yuto said as he and Kaneko left the room through the main door, and Naruto laid back on the couch with a relaxed sigh. Yuto was somebody that gave him conflicted feeling, because he was able to feel what Yuto was truly feeling deep down in his soul. That festering hate bubbling under the surface waiting to explode was something that Naruto would rather avoid if given the chance. Kiba stiffened hearing this. While he knew the hatred he had for Excalibur, he did not expect Naruto to know about it. Then he recalled how the queen could sense emotions and sighed. The others glanced at him but felt this was not a topic to talk about right now. Naruto's eye went to Gasper playing something called Mario, before he felt that Gasper was feeling very nervous about the thought of meeting new people. The boy was lucky that Naruto was helping him control his sacred gear, or he might have bigger problems than meeting new people. So Naruto-kun, what is your personal opinion on what will raise my chances of beating Riser in a rating game? Will Issei be able to make a big difference, or will these two Kendo Club members with no sacred gears be able to better increase my chances? Rias stiffened with a gasp hearing this. She feared this would come up and she prayed. She did not miss the irony of that statement, that her counterpart did not have to marry him and that she could find a way out of it. Rias asked her most powerful piece his opinion on the matter, while Naruto placed his hand on his chin and thought. Riser was the potential fiancé that Rias would have to marry if she couldn't defeat Riser in a rating game, but the difference between them was that Riser had experience in a full peerage. That means that his pieces would be much more experienced, and in larger number than what they had. Well, with Gasper we will be able to quickly take out the lesser pieces like pawns quickly with or without either of them. The only problem would be taking them all out before they get into our territory NYA. Then they can promote and gain power, but if that happens Akeno and I can still take them out. Riser's most powerful pieces are his rooks, knights, and his queen as well as his sister being his bishop NYA. Yuto can take care of the rooks by using his speed advantage, but then he will be open for the knights. Kaneko and Akeno are not fast enough for fighting against a knight, and I will need to be near you in case Riser goes after you directly. Rias thought of the strategy and slumped slightly. Gasper was a big key in this, so she could not use that strategy at all. She would have to make several changes to figure it out. She sighed and kept reading, hoping to hear more that she can use. We don't know what Issei's sacred gear is, so depending on that aspect of him would be foolish. Two well-trained pawns with bodies that can withstand a promotion would be best in this case, but there is the chance Issei will have a great sacred gear for battle NYA. Naruto started out his explanation on how the battle would go at this point. Rias paused before she looked determined to get not only Issei but the two other future pawns as well. Gasper would be a key player in this battle, but his sacred gear is both a blessing and a curse. He didn't have a high enough control of it to not affect his allies that were too weak to resist it, and for some reason Naruto was the only one in Rias' peerage that could resist the effects for some unknown reason. The major threats were Riser Phoenix, Revel Phoenix, his queen, and his knights. The rest of his pieces were more like cannon fodder than a real threat at this point. If I turn into bats, I can increase the number of people I can freeze. Gasper pointed out with a slightly unsure tone, and Naruto sighed lightly. Yes, but it would be better to keep you near out area so that we can stop them from promoting their pieces. If you go into their territory you are wide open for attack, and you can't promote like a pawn. You are a key player in defending Rias, which makes your safety a high priority NYA. Rias sighed again, missing Gasper, and wished that he was here as well. The others frowned sadly, missing the crossing dressing Dampier. Kaneko, Yuto, and Akeno will be key players in invading the enemy territory at this moment NYA. Naruto explained gently so that he didn't make Gasper feel weak or unimportant. Gasper was barely able to keep his sacred gear from automatically activating, and that was thanks to Naruto. His gear was just as much a blessing as it was a curse, so he needed to be in a place by himself so that he won't affect his allies. That doesn't answer my question though. In your opinion, what option is better for victory? Rias asked Naruto with a bit more urgency in her voice, while he nodded in remembrance to her question. I am getting to that. You or I will have to personally take care of his queen, and Gasper will search out his sister when we have gotten rid of his other pieces NYA. Then while he keeps her frozen we can gang up on Riser with everyone we have left. I say the better option is Murayama and Katase in this case. They have both training in how to be swordswomen, their bodies are well conditioned, and they are very motivated in getting better. With them we get a high number of people that can promote, and they will be easier to train. With Issei we would have to work on him attaining his sacred gear, hoping it is a battle-ready sacred gear, teaching him how to use it, prepare his body to handle the strain of promoting, increase his base stats, find a way to motivate him, get him battle experience and increase his reflexes, and that is just very time-consuming when we don't know when Riser will make the challenge NYA. Naruto explained with a frustrated look on his face. Rias groaned hearing all of this. She felt if there wasn't the problem with Riser over her head she could be able to get her peerage up and trained no problem before she even thinks of getting into the rating games. The others saw Naruto plans was good, and while they lacked Gasper they might be able to handle it if they had more member in their peerage. Akeno nodded, seeing that Rias was right with getting all three of the humans as her pawns. Issei would potentially be much more valuable than both girls combined, but could they really take a chance on if he could be better? They didn't even know what his sacred gear was at this point, or how many pawns he would take. If he took too many they would lose out on numbers later, and sacred gear users were always known to take more than one pawn. The girls had training, and they would be battle-ready within days of getting used to real swords, and increasing their base stats would be very simple when it came to motivation. There are too many variables in this, so either the two that are the obvious choice, or the wild card that could be worth a lot down the road. This is a very hard choice indeed, and I will trust your opinion on this. Akeno, could you bring the two girls here for me? The Kendo Club doesn't let out until 5:30 anyway, so they should still be there. Rias requested of her more powerful rook, who strangely fought with mostly spells. Akeno pouts here, still not getting used to the fact she was no longer the queen. Akeno smiled lightly and bowed to Rias in understanding, before she set out on her own way to go get the girls that would help Rias in her future as a king. When she was gone only 3 people were left in the room, and one of them wasn't much a talker. Hopefully Issei is only worth a few pawns, and we can get all 3 of them. I highly doubt that though, because his sacred gear had emotions, which means that it has a personality. It would worth a lot to turn him. Sadly, just being worth a lot doesn't mean that it is useful. Much like that sacred gear that lets you see through clothes because the spirit of some peeper named Tom, Naruto said before he paused when he realized that the original peeping Tom had been turned into a sacred gear that allowed people to look through people's clothes. Rather useless in battle, and for all they knew Issei's was useless as well. Rias bit her thumb thinking, if Naruto was telling the truth and the facts were true with Issei, then she might not have enough pawns for all 3. She felt all 3 would be good for her, but she did not know what to do. A thought came to her about one little fact she had forgotten about. Could that work though? Would that be enough? She returned to the book to see what else she can learn. Okay, now that we have a game plan on who to pick, let's get back to planning. I think that we should send Kaneko and Yuto into enemy territory first. Both of them are good at sneaking around. Maybe they can eliminate a few before the direct battle starts, and then work on setting up traps. Rias suggested first in the usual conversation she and Naruto had when they were pretty much alone. Well, the conversation they usually had when they needed to come up with plans that they could use against Riser Phoenix. Right now the odds were lightly more in his favor than theirs, which they needed to correct as quickly as possible. No, Yuto should run around the border of our area while Kaneko and Akeno set off into enemy territory. If Riser is smart, he would be thinking of overwhelming you with power by distracting us with his high ranks pieces long enough for his pawns to get in deep and promote, and then we will be overwhelmed by high-ranking pieces with experience. We also have to consider the fact that they are allowed 2 items per rating game. That means that they may have Phoenix tears to heal themselves. Yuto will patrol the area and take care of any pawns trying to get in, and either I or Gasper will take care of the ones that get through. Naruto said as he placed the pieces on the chessboard Rias had around to represent all the different areas and places that people should be. Right now it showed both rooks in the enemy territory, the knight at the edge of the territories, the bishop near the knight, and the king and queen next to each other. Rias thought it over and thought Naruto was right. It hurt that her idea, as she was thinking of the same plan as her counterpart, was bad, but at least she is not finding out this on the battlefield. I can see your point, and while Akeno and Kaneko act as distraction, we can promote either Issei or Murayama and Kataise into higher pieces, before we start moving forward and begin picking them off. Gasper, you will be in charge of keeping Revel frozen in time for as long as you can, maybe his queen as well. Better safe than sorry. Think you can handle it? Rias asked her bishop, and her answer was Gasper giving her a shaky nod and a shy thumbs up. Rias smiled, happy her friend was be such a big help to her. Even if he was shy and scared, he would do anything for her. Naruto looked over the pieces for a second, before he picked up the bishop and knight that weren't being used. You still need to fill these positions. We can win without them, but it would be better if you got something to fill them with. Nya. Naruto said seriously, and even his Nya sounded serious as well. Akeno giggled here, "Aw, so cute, even if he is not in any pain." She glances at Kaneko, who is glaring. Maybe you should add Nya to your sentences as well. It would make you even cuter as well. Kaneko felt her eyebrow twitch and had to fight from throwing something hard to Akeno, like the whole couch for instance. Rias closed her eyes and nodded, before she let out a sigh. She knew that she could easily win if she had all her pieces filled, and with her queen she could just send out Naruto and he could take care of all of Riser's peerage besides his queen. That would leave her open to attack, and if she was taken out that was game over for the entire thing. She had to rely on her entire peerage for a winning plan. Riser and Revel were the most dangerous in the game though, both of them would be extremely hard to defeat by damage. They were from the Phoenix family, and had instant regeneration because of that. They weren't impossible to hurt, but actually putting them down would be too hard. That was why Gasper would freeze Revel and the rest of them would gang up on Riser and throw whatever they had at him long enough for either herself or Naruto to land a fatal blow on him. Her power of destruction or Naruto's Jujutsu would be the key to finishing Riser, but if Naruto was defeated her chances of winning would go down from 40% to 10%. As much as she hated to admit it, Riser was powerful in his own right. He could easily take out Kiba, Gasper, and Kaneko if given the chance. Akeno would be defeated as well if things were turned into a dragged-out fight, while she knew that she herself had a good chance of losing without Naruto's help to weaken his healing long enough to give a fatal blow. Rias scowled as well knowing in the end it would come down to Riser. Naruto-kun, how is your Jujutsu coming? Can you promise that you can defeat Riser if given the chance? Rias asked seriously, while Naruto thought about it for a second. I can do it, but I would need some time. Riser has a high mastery over fire, wind, and with his instant healing he will be trouble to put down Nya. I have been working on something that I think will take care of the fire and healing though, I am pretty sure I can do it if I get him one-on-one though Nya. Naruto said with a sure tone to his voice. He knew that if he could get Riser alone then he would be able to use his Jujutsu to slow his healing and negate his fire abilities completely. Then it was just a matter of hitting him with an attack powerful enough to put him down, but he had nothing to take care of the wind attacks. Kaneko looked down slightly hearing this. She felt bad that her skill in what her species knows is all but none. She was scared in what it might do but she knew she would have to learn one day. She glanced at the book and wondered how her counterpart was handling it. Good, and while you do that I will take down the queen with some help if I need it. Yuto has been working on a sword that can delete fire so he may be useful against Riser as well. Yuto should go against Riser before you and see if he can defeat him with his sword birth. Rias commented to Naruto, while he nodded slightly. Even if Yuto was defeated it wasn't like he was going to die, and while they didn't like this idea of using him there was a lot on the line here. Yuto would understand why, and they would fully explain it to him so that he didn't think they were sending him to his defeat. He had a real chance of defeating Riser if he made a sword that could take care of fire. Kiba nodded smiling at his king, yes I would not hold it against you Bucho. I doubt my fire eater sword would be able to defeat Riser like that but it may slow his flames down. Maybe enough for one of us to deal a good blow. Rias nodded still worried, alright we will see when our time comes. Naruto blinked before he realized that Yuto and Kaneko were coming back with a slight depressed feeling, which meant that they failed and Issei had already been gotten by Sona. That or Issei was dead by a fallen angel's hands, and the body was completely destroyed. Rias frowns here feeling sorry for her counterpart but she was sure she still had a chance. Yuto and Kaneko are coming back without Issei, and Akeno is coming back with the two I told you about. It would seem that Sona or the fallen angels got to him first. Naruto concluded when he felt Akeno enter his range with two more people with her that were feeling excited. Akeno herself was feeling excited as well, but no doubt for a different reason. Akeno sighed as she could imagine the pain she could bring to the pawns. She blushed getting a little giddy thinking about it. She hoped when the new pawns came she might be able to break them in some before Rias has them work for her. Damn it Sona. Rias muttered with a nasty pout on her face, before she cheered up at the news that she would still be getting 2 pawns out of this. Normal humans like these ones would only cost 1 piece each, meaning that she would still have 6 pawns left after them. That was equal to a rook and a pawn, 2 knights or bishops, a knight or bishop and 3 pawns, or just simply 6 pawns. That was still a max of 8 pieces she could still use counting the knight and bishop. She could still have a full peerage of 15 people if she found the right people to fill the roles. Rias startled slightly when she felt Naruto sit on her lap and lean back into her breasts with his cat ears sticking out of his head, and when she looked down at him she saw him wink at her. She smiled back and leaned back so that the two of them were relaxing again, With more people coming, Naruto would have to deal with more emotions again, so by getting into contact with her he was focusing on her emotions. That, or he was just getting her to relax by doing what they did to bond when they were younger, and he was still able to sit her lap. She wrapped an arm around his stomach while using her other hand to run him behind the ears. Now this would be a strange scene for anyone, as well as an ironic one. Kiba raised a brow at that comment. He could understand strange but ironic. Naruto was a male queen, and he was sitting in the lap his female king Rias. They were a very unique pair. He was the youngest person in her peerage, while also being her strongest. She was his first non-family friend, but was also his legal owner. Yet, despite all that, they were still the best of friends, as close as best friend can be. Rias smiled happy for her counterpart. She knew her friends were close to her, but she wondered what it would be like to have someone that close to her. I miss our garden. You ever wonder how our roses are doing? Rias asked with a slight smile on her face when she thought about the rose bush they planted together. Their little garden had flourished in the years they had worked on it together, and even Kaneko had watered it a few times with them. It was tradition though for Naruto and Rias to water it with him in her lap while they just talked about whatever came to their minds, while deepening their bonds. Yeah, but Grafia is taking care of it while we are gone. They are going to be doing great, Naya. Naruto said while he experienced pure bliss when Rias found that one spot behind his ear, and he completely melted into her body when she started to lightly scratch him right behind the right ear with the very tips of her fingernails. Kaneko noticed the look Akeno gave her and she glared at the queen. Don't try it, the rook warned. Even the emotions of everyone around him besides Rias were wiped from his mind when his skilled hands touched him. His tail came out and started to wrap around her waist as he sank into her soft body and completely relaxed. I don't want to interrupt this. Gasper thought with a small smile as he closed himself inside the lid of his box, and with it shut it was like he wasn't in the room at all. He felt awkward around them when they were like this. This was a private moment between great friends. Rias sighed as she closed the book. After the ups and downs she felt that was the perfect ending to the chapter. Kiba looked at Rias. So what do we do, Bucho? Rias smiled. Talk to Murayama and Kataise tomorrow. When they come I offer them to become my pawns, but I am sure they will accept. Afterwards we shall read more of the book with them here as well. Meanwhile my familiar will keep an eye on Issei to see if the fallen angels are indeed watching him. She got up and gathered her magic for her seal to head home. Akeno raised a brow. And what are you doing? Rias smiled. I got to go see my mother. I am in need for a trade. The next day after school Rias smiled at her peerage before her. She had gotten back from seeing her mother last night and was confident she was ready for her new pawns. Kiba smiled at her. I managed to talk to Murayama and Kataise, and they agreed to come here after their practice with the Kendo Club. They would come sooner but felt that with the tournament coming up they needed all the practice they need. Rias nodded. That is fine. It gives them a chance to further hone their skill before they become my pawns. With the matter of Issei, it seems a fallen angel come to him under the disguise of a schoolgirl and asked him out on a date. He will be going on the date tomorrow, so I will have my familiar give Issei a contract so I may come to him when he makes his wish. Afterwards I shall have him my pawn as well. The others looked at her but was quiet as they still felt like they were rushing with the matter of Issei. Kiba held the book up. Perhaps we should read a chapter or two before Murayama and Kataise get here. Rias nodded with a small grin. She hoped she would at least hear what Issei's sacred gear would be at least. Chapter 7, Future Negativity. I think I am going to throw up. Naruto thought with wide eyes as he ran towards the trash can in the clubroom and knelt in front of it with his face as pale as it could get. The group was surprised hearing this in the first sentence of the chapter. What's wrong? Kaneko asked, worried for her brother. No idea, Kiba replied before he started off again, hoping to find the answer. Naruto surprised the rest of the devils in the room by actually getting physically sick and throwing up into the trash can. Kaneko wasted no time in rushing over to his side and patting him softly on the back to help him out. It had been 2 days since they had lost out on the chance to gain Issei as a peerage member, but they were also glad to know that Issei was worth too much for Sona to reincarnate as well. Rias stiffened hearing this before she leaned closer to find out why. That meant that Issei was still completely human at the moment, which meant that it was possible to get him as an ally later if they played their cards right. The only difference though was that now neither Rias nor Sona would be able to get Issei into their peerages, because Rias had already talked both of the girls chosen by Naruto into her peerage as her pawns, which meant that she didn't have enough pieces to reincarnate Issei either. Akeno hummed as she went over that information. Sona already has 2 pawns, so she would have 6 left. So even with 6 pawns wasn't enough to reincarnate Issei. It seems we won't be able to have all 3 as your pawns, Rias. Rias however smiled. Don't worry, I got that all figured out. If I am right, then I should be able to have all 3. They looked at her, but the devil would not give them anything else. Right now both girls were currently running around the city handing out contract papers so that they would be able to form contracts with humans and raise their abilities and status among the devils. Both girls had been immediately interested in the idea when they heard that Naruto, Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, and Yudo were devils, or hybrids. Each of them had a special place in the school, and each were famous in their own right. Naruto and Kaneko were the twin mascots of the school, Yudo was the prince of the school, and both Rias and Akeno were the 2 great ladies of the school. Akeno giggled. It seems Kaneko shares her titles with her brother. Makes sense that twins would share. Though I would have thought that Naruto would share Kiba's title being so popular with the girls. Kaneko glared at Akeno, not liking how the fact the queen was making Naruto seem like some sort of player or woman's man. Those girls better not be after Naruto. Each of them were amazingly popular among the students, male and female alike in some cases. In others only the females liked Yudo, while the men hated his guts. The fact that turning into a devil would make them stronger was something both girls looked forward to. At least it looks like they would agree. Rias pointed out with a grin. We don't know for sure, Kiba added quietly before he went on. Ototo, are you okay? Kaneko asked with a worried tone to her voice when she saw her brother randomly start to throw up into a trash can. The others were worried as well for his safety, because Naruto normally had a stomach of steel when it came to most stuff. Something could be seriously wrong with him if he was throwing up for any reason. Such insanity, evil, killing urge, I have never felt such a vile thing before. Naruto managed to get out in reference to him sensing such a powerful negative emotion that he had gotten visibly sick just from the backlash of sensing this. So his empathy has a backlash as well to it, Akeno said with a pout, but what could be causing all of this? The other had no answer for her. His own body was completely rejecting the emotions that he was sensing, and the inner conflict that these emotions that were not his was causing was gut-rending for him. His words didn't make the others feel any better, nor did it make their worries go away when Naruto was forced to throw up again when he felt another wave of the emotion come into his mind. He vomited into the trash, while Kaneko wrapped her arms around his stomach to help soothe him. It was so random what he was feeling, and it would vanish before reappearing again even stronger, before growing weak to the point that he couldn't feel it. Then it would jump back to insane levels, completely throwing him off guard when he was forced into sensing it again. Even when he had nothing left in his stomach to throw up, the feeling that he needed to throw up was still there inside his gut. Kaneko frowned, worried for not only her brother but for the fact something near them is causing this. Was it a fallen angel? Akeno asked with a frown, because as far as she knew this had only happened to Naruto 2 times before in his life. Both times Naruto had met people that had been completely rotten to the core, and one had been so bad that at his age Naruto had been bedridden for 2 weeks just from his body tearing itself up while adjusting to the extreme negative and evil emotions that had been flowing off that person. No, this was a human. The fallen angels around here are crazy, but not this demented. This person feels a lot like Diodora Astaroth, a human version of that bastard. Naruto growled out in utter anger at the one person that he hated above all other. Rias blinked here. Sure, she did not know him that well and she had a bad feeling about it, but was there something that Naruto knew that was, no other word for it, evil? The others around him had no idea why Naruto hated Diodora so much, mostly because they were not as in the know about the bastard's crimes as Naruto was. Spying on this bastard was one of Kuroka's first spy jobs, and she had told him personally what she found out about the guy. She had confided in him because even she was disgusted by what this devil did to others. Diodora Astaroth was the heir of the Astaroth family, and the younger brother of one of the current Satans. This boy was so twisted and sick that he was secretly committing evil crimes that no sane devil these days would even think of committing. The worst part was that there was no real proof to pin his crimes on him without Koka admitting to spying on him, and as the heir to the Astaroth family they couldn't just kill him in cold blood, even though every fiber of Naruto's very soul demanded that Diodora be killed for what he does, and takes pleasure in. What is it? Rias asked worried. What is the heir doing that was so evil that Naruto would react like this? Kiba looked ahead and gasped loudly in horror. He was still while the others looked at him. Kiba, Rias said softly, please go on. We have to see what is wrong. Kiba nodded before he gulped and took a deep breath and read the first few sentences that caused his reaction. Diodora Astaroth was a sick man, a very evil person. Diodora Astaroth raped nuns and maidens both physically and mentally. The others gasped here. While they knew nuns were considered their enemies to go that far to them. Most devil would avoid a nun or anyone else in the church. Rias covered her mouth, shaking slightly. Could this be true? Was this something different to only this world in the book? She feared the answer to that question. She looked at Kiba and gave him a nod to go on. They had to find out if this was true or not. His crimes would start with him tricking a nun into committing a crime against the church and having her kicked out of the church. And while they were sulking and heartbroken he would prey upon them with his sick and twisted words that he could twist into sounding sweet and caring. He would get the nuns to trust him, and look up to him, and then he would rape them. Worst of all was that he took enjoyment in their betrayed horror, and he would do it over and over again until they were completely broken. His entire peerage was filled with nuns and maidens that he had broken and added to his collection where they would be forever his broken slaves. Rias froze as she heard more details of his crimes. She recalls his peerage of all females so far. She prayed that it was simply something else, but she was not so sure. Naruto made it his personal mission to find proof of Diodora's actions, and with that proof he would be able to put that punk on the chopping block for death row. Naruto wanted Diodora dead as soon as possible, but the only way that he could prove it would be for him to find a nun that he had gotten kicked out of the church but hadn't raped yet. Then he would be able to prove that he had been threatening the stalemate with the angels by going after holy women. Rias frowned, hoping this was not true, but if it was, I would need to talk to my brother about this. I already plan on telling him the book, but if this is true he would have to go and investigate. I pray this is simple only in this book. There is a human vile enough to cause this sort of reaction. Are you sure? Yuto asked to confirm what Naruto was saying, and a blank stare was his response. This person would be the third person that Naruto had reacted this badly to, so of course Naruto was sure what this guy was. This person sounds scary. Gasper yelled as he closed himself completely inside his box, while Naruto wiped his mouth off and drank some of the tea that Akeno handed him. He gulped it down like he was a man in the desert dying of thirst, before he finished it and gave her a thankful look. He could still feel the backlash from this person, but right now Naruto was focusing and lowering his range to as short as it could go. Naruto stood up and wobbled on his feet lightly, before he leaned against the wall with a thin layer of sweat on his face. Kaneko was worried. Not only was her brother feeling this way, but he seems to be trying to make an enemy with an heir to a powerful family. She hoped that her brother would both succeed to bring justice to the women but also to keep him safe. His always active power had another weakness besides overloading him, and that was when Naruto was faced with an emotion that was the opposite of him and extremely strong. It made him truly sick. His body completely rejected everything about these emotions, and the internal battle would slowly tear him apart until he could force himself to block out the one person causing them. There were people that disgusted him like Riser, but mostly because they were assholes, and then there were people that caused him to become sick like Diodora, an unknown person, and this guy that gave off a slight devil hunter aura around him that Naruto could sense even from here. The others looked at each other. A devil hunter was dangerous, and if Naruto could feel an aura like that, it was nothing good about that at all. I need to take a walk and clear my head, Naruto said shortly, meaning for there to be no arguments as he walked out of the clubroom with heavy steps. Right now he needed to go find the other important person that he had sensed before he was forced to pull back his range as much as possible. An emotion to bright and positive that he was being attracted to it like a moth to a flame, but instead of being stopped, Naruto felt a wave of kind emotion touch him when his hand was grabbed by Rias. Be careful, if this person made you sick then they may be strong. I would send somebody with you, but Yuto and Kaneko are going to be busy training Katase and Murayama in how to control their new bodies. Rias said, and he completely understood where she was coming from. Kaneko nodded, not wanting her bother to be alone with whoever is making him feel this way out there close to him. Kaneko came forward and kissed Naruto on the cheek slightly to wish him good luck on his trip, while Akeno smiled at him and pat him on the back. Naruto knew that Gasper was too shy to come with him on a walk through the city. See you later guys, good for nothing vampire NYA. Naruto said with his and Kaneko's special goodbye made just for Gasper, the nickname that wasn't nearly as mean as it sounded. Akeno giggled, unable to help herself. Well, I can see you two giving him a nickname like that. The group sighed, wishing Gasper was here. But then they were not sure how he would react hearing the shocking horror they learned just now. He heard Gasper shout of a goodbye from inside his box, before Naruto stopped and walked over to the box. Ripping open the lid to the box, he pulled a blushing and protesting Gasper out of the box and hefted him over his shoulder. The fact Gasper was taller than Naruto made this image as funny as hell. A short Neko boy queen was carrying a girly cross-dressing Dampier boy over his shoulder, while the pink eyes boy tried to get out of Naruto's grip. Giggles were heard from Rias and Akeno as they pictured this. Kaneko smiled slightly, knowing her brother was helping the Dampier in his own way. Kiba smiled, feeling better now. He hoped Gasper would be with them and wondered his reaction to this. Please let go of me Naruto, I don't want to go outside. Gasper pleaded, but he was promptly ignored by Naruto in favor of him turning to Rias with a small smile on his face. I am taking Gasper with me, see you all later. Naruto said with a sigh as he started to feel better already now that he was in contact with somebody that he trusted and knew well. As long as he stayed in contact with Gasper, he would be able to resist the negative emotions all over the city. That and the fact that if Naruto was going to have to go outside of his comfort zone, then he was going to make this awkward for Gasper as well. Kaneko nodded, knowing that the two friends would be great help to one another. Please let me go Naruto, I don't like sunlight. Gasper tried to get Naruto to let go of him again, only for Naruto to raise his hand and smack Gasper on the ass hard enough to make the blonde-haired Dampier eep and stop all resisting at the humiliation of getting a spank. Naruto nodded neutrally, before he started to walk out of the clubroom again. Akeno giggled hearing this. Era, makes me wish I would see this in person. Rias nodded with a smile, it seemed all too funny and wanted to see it in person as well. What? As the queen of Rias Peerage, it was his job to both help and punish the members of Rias Peerage when he though it would help them out. If Gasper always stayed in his comfort zone, he would never grow as a person. Gasper looked and acted so much like a girl that Naruto felt no awkwardness about spanking the silent Dampier. Honestly, it wasn't that strange for either Rias or Naruto to deliver a devil spank as a motivation punishment. The major difference was that Naruto got you once most of the time, while when Rias spanked you she did it somewhere between 100 and 1000 times while using magic. Akeno's eyes lit up as she turned to Rias. The devil looked at her friend and stated, "No Akeno. If I have to go to school, you have to go outside. Now let's go into the city and take a walk." Naruto shouted at Gasper as the door was slammed behind them, and the others left in the room. Sweat dropped when they saw the group leave. Naruto-kun, you are perhaps the only one that treats Gasper like that. Rias though with a sweat drop when she heard the sounds of arguments outside of the door. There was a smack sound again, and then complete silence, meaning that Gasper had tried to use his sacred gear to escape, only for Naruto to smack his ass before he could and continue walking anyway. Sometimes it was best to leave Gasper's growth to Naruto, the only person in her peerage that could resist the time-stopping powers of Gasper's sacred gear. Akeno giggled once more, if only I can do that to Gasper as well. He might be for the better after it. I doubt that Akeno, Rias replied, getting her queen to pout. Yufufufu, it would seem that Gasper-kun will be getting some courage training today. Akeno said with a teasing giggle, and a sensual lick of her lips at the obvious teasing. She just loved it when other people were uncomfortable, and right now both Naruto and Gasper were way out of their comfort zones. Naruto won't let Gasper get hurt, so there shouldn't be any problem. Anyway, this will be good for them both. Right now Naruto only goes to the school, but never in the city. Gasper is only used to people in the club seeing him, so it would be good for him to experience life on the outside. Naruto knows this, and Gasper will help Naruto keep from sensing as many emotions if they remain in contact. This will be a good thing for both of them. Rias nodded, seeing this was being good for the both of them. Rias concluded as a red circle appeared in the middle of the clubroom, showing that somebody was using the Grimoire circle to teleport to their location. That could only mean that Katase and Murayama had completed handing out flyers, and were ready to come back to the clubroom. Ototo, you better know what you are doing. Kaneko thought, with her neutral face turned into a frowning one. I am sure he does, Kaneko, Kiba added. He does not seem like someone that would be so reckless. The twin sister nodded, but still worried. She knew Naruto well enough to know that if he was taking Gasper, then he was going to search for somebody, and Gasper's ability was great when it came to capturing people without them noticing until it was too late. That, or Naruto was going to abuse Gasper's abilities to go on a pranking spree. That was the way he worked. He liked to do everything in his power to either get further in life, or have fun. This could be pleasure or business, either of which had some flaws to it. She knew though that she was needed in order to train the new devils as soon as possible, because Naruto was more of a one-on-one trainer. When training a group, he didn't really have any talent in that, but he could teach anyone one-on-one in the arts of fighting. Between that and his growing abilities in emotion sensing, he was going to have a hard time in group training, and his temporary method of blocking out emotions only lasted so long before it ran out. No, it was like his body was getting prepared for something, and his emotion sensing abilities were his body's way of getting prepared. The question though was, what did his emotion sensing powers have to do with his body getting ready for something? The group looked at one another. Do you think it is for that sacred gear? Akeno asked. Rias frowned, thinking, I don't know. Perhaps, but we have little information on it to be sure. As much as she was not going to like this, she knew that there was only one person she could trust to have a serious answer to this question. Kuroka. Kaneko frowned, hearing that fact her counterpart would need her sister's help. Kiba closed the book before they all were quiet. Rias finally broke the silence. We need to keep this to ourselves. They looked at her as she went on. We have no evidence or any fact that Diodora is doing this. We don't even know if this is true here or not. To accuse him without evidence will be not only pointless but backfire on us. I will talk to my brother, and with any luck he will investigate, but I hope beyond hope that what the book says is not true. They all looked at each other and knew Rias was right. Let's read another chapter before Murayama and Katase come. We don't want them knowing about this either. It would cause nothing but trouble. Naruto sighed in relief as he and Gasper walked through the city hand in hand. Nobody was giving them a strange glance thanks to the fact that Gasper looked so much like a girl, while wearing girl's clothes to go with his natural girly looks. If Naruto wasn't completely sure that Gasper was a boy, he too would be one of the people that would naturally think that Gasper was a female. Akeno giggled here. She knew it would be funny if someone confused Gasper for a female. Issei does not know. Maybe if we find a way to help Gasper, then it would be a funny reaction to see. As it was, Naruto wasn't disgusted in the least by holding his friend's hand. This wasn't exactly an option for him. Until he could turn on and off his empathy powers, he had to hold on to somebody and remain in physical contact to keep from overloading his head with hundreds or even thousands of emotions that were not his own. As it was, Gasper's nervousness was the main emotion in his head, while the emotions of the people around them were dulled down to a range of 10 meters before he couldn't feel anyone anymore. His range may have decreased because of his contact with Gasper, but he was still being affected by Gasper's emotions as well, but he was used to dealing with the Dampire's nervousness. He was able to easily shrug off the nervous feeling that he automatically began to feel by being in contact with the girly boy. I don't like the sun, this is scary. Gasper whispered lowly to himself, knowing that Naruto wouldn't give a crap if he was comfy with the outside or not. If Naruto was making him come outside so that he could get used to the outside world, then he wouldn't have much a choice in the matter. Rias smiled fondly. She wished she would be able to do this with Gasper to help her friend out. His butt still hurt from the smacks Naruto had given him earlier thanks to him squirming attempts to escape his fate. His free hand went to his butt and began to rub it lightly to soothe what was left of the stinging sensation. He had only once been spanked by Rias before this time, and that was because he had accidentally tripped and broke one of her prized DVDs of her secret anime hobby. Rias pouts here as she did not have a secret anime hobby. Sure, she found it interesting for some shows, but they made it sound like she was way too into it. She had spanked him a few times, and the pain faded almost immediately after. With Naruto the pain lasted quite a while after you got smacked. Akeno giggled again. I am sure my spankings will hurt more and will last even longer. No, Akeno. Ah, Akeno moaned to her king. Naruto was humming a song to himself with his smile bright and wide. Not being able to go outside often thanks to his power made him sort of an indoor cat. He truly appreciated the moments like this when he could enjoy the warmth of the sun on his skin, and the light rays warming up his white locks that spiked in every direction. It was in his nature to like sunlight, despite the fact it conflicted with the added nature of the devil side of him hating sunlight. Naruto had always been much more Nekosho than he was devil, while Kaneko chose to be more devil than Nekosho. She refused herself many of the things that he used to love about being a cat, like bathing in the sunlight. Kaneko had a blank look on her face, not sure how she should respond to that. She never thought about herself being more devil than Nekosho, but she knew she was either way. Get over it, Gasper, this walk will do you some good. If I have to, I will spank you in front of everyone here, or prank you nya. Naruto said with a sly smile, his eyes glowing demonically as they lit up with the feeling of the prankster lighting up inside him again. The last time that Gasper had seen that look, all of his girls' clothes had been replaced with men's clothes. Gasper shivered in the memory of how itchy all of those were to him, and how thankful he was when Naruto was told to give him his clothes back by Rias. The club laughed or giggled here. They could see Gasper panicking if all his girl clothes went missing. Please don't prank me, I will be a good boy. Gasper pleaded like he was about to become a dying man, which wasn't far off when considering that he could die of embarrassment if Naruto decided to up the level of his pranks. Naruto was known as the prankster Hellcat among the Grimoire household thanks to how infamous his pranks had become, and nobody was safe from these pranks. Not even Searsex was safe, nor was he able to look the color purple without shivering slightly. Rias was gasping hearing this, and she was not the only one. They others could not believe their ears when they heard Naruto pranked a great Satan. Gasper had no idea how Naruto had gotten a Satan to fear a color, but once Searsex had loved the color purple, but now he avoided it like the plague. Akeno giggled wondering how he did it and hoped she would get to see Naruto perform such an act. Naruto puffed his chest out in pride at the fear in the other boy's eyes, before he noticed something out of the corner of his eye. Just out of his sensing range was Issei Hyodo, with some strange girl. Rias snapped out of it when she heard the name of one troublesome future pawn. When she focused on the girl it clicked, that must be the fallen angel my familiar seen him with. The other looked at one another, Naruto and Gasper as they might be able to help him. Kiba said. Rias shook her head, Naruto is handicapped by his power and so many people there. Not to mention Gasper can leave his side, so fighting is out. Kaneko frowned, hoping her brother would not get hurt by the fallen angel. Naruto blinked a few times and started to scratch his head in confusion when he noticed something really off about the girl that Issei was with, but he couldn't place his finger on it exactly. They were just out of his range though, so he wasn't able to feel them even though he could see them. He could take his hand off Gasper's hand, but that would end up with him feeling the feelings of thousands of people rushing into his head at the same time. Is that Issei? Hey Gasper, you should go back to Rias. Kaneko stiffened. No, she whispered. Rias frowned, wondering what Naruto was up to if he was sending his only line of emotional defense away. Something feels off about that girl. I will follow them around and see if I can find anything out. Naruto stated as he vanished in a quick poof of smoke, and in his place was a very small kitten with golden eyes. The group, besides Kaneko, blinked stunned at what they heard. What? Kiba asked. Kaneko read on, not looking at anyone. The top of the kitten's head had white fur on it that was styled in a messy pattern much like how his hair formed in humanoid form. Naruto fell to the ground and landed on his paws with a very soft sigh, while Gasper's eyes widened at how Naruto transformed into a cute kitten. Rias pouts, wanting a cute little kitten like that. She glanced at Kaneko, who noticed and sent a glare causing Rias to pout more. My counterpart is so lucky. It's not fair. Are you okay? You were throwing up earlier because of your sensing power. Gasper was able to withstand the urge to run away from the sunlight out of concern for Naruto, while the kitten-shaped Naruto smirked lightly. I will be fine. As a kitten my emotions change enough so that my power is much less accurate and potent. Don't worry much about me, so long as I don't get attacked while in this form I will be fine. Just go and warn Rias that something strange is happening nya. Naruto ordered lightly to the Dampier, not knowing what was going on with Issei worried him slightly. Now that the only two devils in the city with the ability to reincarnate people couldn't bring him back if he was killed, Issei was in much danger for his status as the user of an apparently powerful sacred gear. Naruto started to run towards the boy and strange girl while Gasper began to run in the direction of the clubroom. Rias frowned. While she hoped both herself and her counterpart got Issei as her pawn, she did not wish him dead in order to do so even if she was a devil. Naruto managed to get closer to the two of them, and immediately the girl sent Naruto a dirty look while Issei wasn't looking. Her long black hair seemed to turn blacker, and her purple eyes held malicious intent in them. The eyes became kind again when Issei looked at the girl and then saw Naruto on the ground nearby them. Issei grinned and got down on his knees and held a hand out to Naruto. Well, isn't this little guy just the cutest? Huh, he kind of looks like somebody I know. This your kitten Yuma? Issei asked the girl that was apparently being called Yuma. Akeno giggled. Even as a kitten Naruto has that feeling that people know. She glanced at Kaneko with a grin. You know. Never. Naruto took this chance and jumped into Issei's hands so that he could stay right next to them. Naruto sat down on Issei's shoulder, and started to stare at Yuma with a mocking look. She clicked her teeth with an annoyed glare at the cat, before she smiled at Issei again. I am not much a cat person Issei, but it looks like she likes you. Yuma pointed out the fact that Naruto was pretty much genderless in this form, which sadly made it appear that he was female even though his soul was still male. Sometimes being genderless when you were in cat form was pretty annoying. This was one of those times. Kaneko blinked here as she did not know that. She wondered if that was true here as well. I will eat your soul, and send your body straight to the abyss. Naruto sent a telepathic message right into this Yuma girl's head. She grit her teeth even tighter at how annoying he was being to her. It was easy to see that she hated Naruto right now, and the fact that her target was right next to him was making this more difficult for her to get rid of him. Naruto was able to sense this, so he jumped up onto Issei's head and made himself comfy. He stuck his tongue out at her, and she nearly lost it at how obviously he was taunting her. The others laughed before Kiba said, I wish I can see this. It must be a funny scene. Kaneko smiled softly, cheeky brother. Issei-hun, why don't you place that cat on the ground so that we can get back to our date? Yuma asked kindly, while Issei just laughed and tried to remove Naruto from his head, only to find out that Naruto scratched his hand the second he brought it to close. He pulled his hand back and hissed in pain lightly, before he noticed something strange about the cut on his hand. Looking at it for a moment, his gaze shifted to Yuma with a slight suspicious look in his eyes. Bad girl. More like naughty girl, Akeno stated with a giggle. I think she needs to be punished. The other's sighed as she had a small daydream with a slight blush on her face. She snapped out of it when Kaneko started to read again. What the hell? These scratches spell out a warning. Issei thought in shock as he looked at the scratches that started to bleed and cover up the writing. He looked up at the small amount of white in his vision, as well as the black in Yuma's hair. For a moment he pictured a great evil about her, for a second that is. Good, he seems to be getting it. Naruto thought. Yes. Rias cheered with a small fist pump. Way to go Naruto. Before the look of realization was wiped from his face when Yuma pressed her breasts against his arm. She used his perversion against him and wiped his suspicions from head. Rias scowled while the others sighed. That perverted mind of his will be a bit of trouble for him. Kiba mused seeing how the fallen angel wrecked all of Naruto's work with ease. Rias pouts thinking, on one hand his perverted mind will make it easy to get him motivated to train and get stronger. On the other hand he might get distracted too easily with that mind of his. She will have to work with him carefully. Pervert, Kaneko accurately claimed. Naruto grit his teeth lightly, before he was knocked from Issei's head and landed on the ground with his feet when he saw that Yuma was grinning down at him. Naruto hissed at Yuma, before he was forced back away when Yuma dropped a silver cross in front of him. Crosses was something that he couldn't stand because of the pain they caused his half-devil nature. Hey Issei, you know what, there is this perfect chance for you and I to bond. How about we go to the church? There are some pretty neat statues there I want to show you. Yuma asked with a large, yet slightly evil, smile on her face that only appeared evil when Issei was looking away. The second he looked at her, that smile turned purely kind-hearted, and the brown-haired sacred gear holder blushed while chuckling to himself lightly. The others sighed. Well, he's dead, Kiba muttered. The small kitten on the ground was completely forgotten by him, but he was not forgotten by Naruto when the boy-turned cat rushed around the cross on the ground and started to claw at Issei's leg to get his attention. The second the boy entered that church, Naruto would be unable to help him should Yuma try and kill him. Damn it, brat, if you continue to fall for her sweater melons you will find yourself on the business end of a shit stick. Naruto sent a strong message of mental strength to Issei in the hopes that the pervy boy would resist the urge of titties and find a way to save himself. Kaniko's eyebrow twitched at how the perverted the sentence sounded and hated the fact she had to read that aloud. The second Naruto transformed into a humanoid form he would be assaulted with thousands of emotions, and his ability to battle would be cut down by 80% when it came to the ability to react in time to dodge an attack. Against a light user, that was a fatal issue that he knew he would need to work around soon, otherwise he would be useless against opponents that could use a devil's weakness against them. Sure thing, let's go, Issei said in excitement, not even noticing the strong message in his head, or the kitten scratching at his pants. The boy started to walk with Yuma, while she stuck her tongue out at Naruto when Issei wasn't looking at her. Naruto's eyes narrowed at that, and when they were out of sight he tried to think of a way to get Issei out of trouble, but sadly nothing was coming to him. Naruto blinked a few times when an idea actually did come to his head. Of course, after Sona had tried to get Issei into her peerage he had been made aware of the existence of the supernatural, even if he wasn't a devil, angel, or fallen angel. Naruto couldn't go to the church himself, but there was somebody that could go in his place. Somebody that would follow his every order to the dot, just because of the fact that he gave the order. The others blinked. What? Who is it? Kiba asked, stunned at what he just heard. He, so you think this has me beat NYA? Well, you can go suck it, Naruto said as a purple magic circle appeared under his white cat form, and in a poof of smoke his own familiar appeared on the ground under him. Oh, Rias muttered, understanding now, but what kind of familiar does he have that can help Issei? Not only was his familiar under him, but now Naruto was back in humanoid form without having to worry about getting a mental overload. Naruto grinned lightly when the smoke fully cleared from his familiar. Standing in front of Naruto was a small dragon standing at about a foot tall. The little dragon was blue-scaled with burning red eyes. Its face was a much lighter blue color, and its eyes were sharp on top while curved on bottom. The wings were about half the length of the dragon's body, and it stood on its two thick back legs. Its front claws were narrow and smaller, while it had a reptile tail with a devil tip on the end of it. On each foot and claw were 3 sharp claws, and its stomach was the same color as its face. Its head was shaped with 3 points, one on each side of the head, and one on top. The others froze as Kaniko finished her sentence. Is that? Rias started but too stunned to finish. A sprite dragon. Akeno finished, also stunned beyond belief. Kaniko was also surprised like her friend, but part of her was also proud at the familiar Naruto had and slightly jealous. She never heard of a devil with a familiar like that, and here Naruto was with one of his own. Cats rule, she said in her head with a smile. This was the sprite dragon that Naruto had as his familiar, and she had the natural ability to cancel out his empathy-based powers as long as he stood within her natural M field that was created by the electricity she generated. While it might not look like it, this dragon was lightning-based and always had a powerful EMF, electromagnetic field, around it that could be used to cancel out his powers while he was within the field. Sprite dragons only became the familiars of pure-hearted people, which proved that Naruto's heart was pure based off of the fact that this was his personal familiar that chose him to be her master. Normally, a sprite dragon would never become a devil's familiar, but because she sensed the purity in his heart she had chosen him a few years back. Since then she had been his more loyal of his 2 familiars. This other was loyal, so long as Naruto met the condition that the other one had set for terms of summoning. Lucky, Rias pouts, clearly jealous. Kiba raised a brow. I wonder what his other familiar is. Akeno nodded, and what he has to do to summon it. She smiled. I hope it has to give some blood or cut himself. Rias rolled her eyes. Akeno, don't be silly. Summoning beast and familiars with blood is a myth, it can never happen. Yep, he could only summon his second familiar under the terms that had been set, or when his life was in terrible danger. The second one meant that he couldn't use his second familiar in raiding games, and because of how humiliating the first condition was for him, he couldn't do the first one in raiding games because of the fact that people actually watched those. Akeno giggled with a sly look in her eyes. Era, I wonder what he has to do. Please give us a hint, please. Kaneko rolled her eyes and kept reading. Although she did wonder what Naruto had to do. Reijeki, I want you to go and make sure that boy doesn't die. If you have to, kill the woman with him, but only as a last resort. Naruto made sure that his order was clear. His familiar was a very prissy girl when she wanted to be. It would seem that sprite dragons were not naturally fond of beings that were the same gender as they were, while they liked people from the opposite gender. Reijeki had electrocuted the hell out of Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, and Kuroka when they each had met the small dragon. The group pouts while Kiba chuckled. The girls were jealous that the cute dragon would shock them when they no doubt would want to pet it, while Kiba was glad he was safe, so to speak. Akeno sighed sadly as she would love a sprite dragon that would shock others around her. She knew they can be after those pure of heart if they love to cause so much pain like she does. Reijeki closed her eyes, before she hopped up into Naruto's arms and started to rub her face into his chest. Naruto rubbed the familiar's head with a smile, before his familiar nodded and started to fly away in the other direction. Naruto frowned and let a red magical circle appear under his body, the magical circle that belonged to the Grimoire family. His body started to turn into red magical particles before he was absorbed into the circle and teleported back to the clubroom. He could find what he was looking for later, because right now something strange was going on. Chapter done, Kaneko stated as she closed the book. Rias pouts, still slightly upset. Not only did Naruto have a rare and good familiar, but it also did not like her and even shocked her for the hell of it, in her mind anyways. While she was worried for Issei, she had faith in Naruto and his familiar. Before she could have the next chapter started, she felt the energy of two people come closer to the clubhouse. She smiled. It looks like my two pawns are now here. Kiba, let them in so we can welcome them into our family. Rias could not help but smile as she looked at her new pawns Kitase and Murayama. The first meeting went smoothly, and when the pair learned they were devil they were shocked for sure, but then Rias explained and asked if they wished to become devils as well. They accepted, both looking for something exciting in their lives and they would be closer to their idols. After making them her pawns and explaining what they must do as a devil as well as the importance of contracts. They had just returned from delivering their flyers and Rias decided to tell them of the book they received. A book of a different timeline? Kitase asked with a raised brow. Rias nodded. Yes, it appears so, or an alternate reality. Several things are the same, such as I am still a devil and part of the Grimoire family and everyone here is a member of my peerage. However, there are many differences that are noticeable as well. In fact, Kaneko here has a twin in that world and they become very dear friends of mine. He also becomes my second in command there, while Akeno is mine here. Both girls looked at Kaneko, who simple sat there eating her snack, and glanced at them. The girls wondered what her twin would be like. So why do you have it? Murayama finally asked. Rias explained how she got it and they were all surprised of how it came to be. They explained what has happened in the book, skipping on chapter with a bit of harsh and secret information, and the two girls were excited to see what comes next. Rias handed the book out to Kitase so she can read the next chapter. Kitase could barely hold her excitement as she opened to the marked page. Chapter 9, Evil Set. There is nothing we can do about it, Naruto. If Issei went into the church, he is on his own. I won't risk any of my peerage's safety for somebody I don't know. Issei can fend for himself. You sending your familiar to help him is the best we can do for him. Rias told Naruto the second he finished his story, while he gripped his fist slightly. He didn't know why, but he had always been a little bit irritable when it came to abandoning people he considered his friends. He would be willing to die for his friends, which made him the perfect member of the Grimoire house, but it also put him at risk when he risked more than just his life to save people. Perv Pants can fend for himself. Kaneko agreed with Rias on the general idea of Issei being left to defend against the fallen angel on his own. The girls could not help but giggle at Kaniko's nickname for Issei while said devil nodded agreeing with her choice of words. Katase and Murayama looked confused as to what was going on, and noticing their confusion Yuto smiled at the two fellow sword users and sat on the couch nearby them. As devils, we are the natural enemies of anything to do with the church. Daylight weakens us slightly, and crosses, holy water, light-based magic, the Bible, as well as a few other things can hurt us. Fallen angels and angels are also enemies we have to watch out for because of our opposing natures. Yuto explained with a sour look on his face at the mention of all of their weaknesses. Katase and Murayama both frowned here. When you say it like that, devils do have a lot of weakness. Rias nodded sadly. Yes we do, but we have worked around them for many years now. As you get stronger you may help gain a form of resistances. Right now holy water would be like acid to the two of you, but it would burn me like boiling hot water. Neither of us can touch it, but the difference is still there. Katase and Murayama looked at one another and nodded, determined to get stronger. Devils got the short end of the stick with that one. They had the weaknesses that both of their enemies' races could easily take advantage of. It was sort of unfair, but they were able to make do just as well. That sucks. I don't get why you are worried about the perv though. Murayama pointed out with her hand going to the handle of her new sword at the thought of Issei. She was not a fan of the peeping Tom, but that also didn't mean she exactly wanted him to die. Murayama nodded with a frown here. She hated to admit it, but she agreed with her counterpart. Now it if simply got the perversion beaten out of him. On the other hand, he was a human after all, so why would one of these fallen angels even want to have anything to do with him for? It was kind of strange. The boy was weaker than them, and they were newly minted devils. They had been stronger than him as humans, which was sad because Issei never really decided to work out. He could have been pretty strong and respectable if he hadn't spent his life with his every being revolving around porn and boobs. Technically, it isn't Issei that Bucho is worried about. We have recently learned that Issei has inside him a sacred gear, an object that humans are gifted with at birth that will give them advantages down the road in life. Some of the greatest men and women in history had sacred gears, making them smarter, stronger, and overall better than the humans surrounding them. Akeno explained to help them understand the situation. Both girls turned to Rias. Really? Their king nodded. Yes, not only did we find that out here, but we also sense it from him when we searched for it. Both were amazed that Issei has something special like that. So that is why you are interested in him? Katase asked with a raised brow. Rias nodded with a slight smile. Well, this book also turned my attention to the two of you, so it cannot be so bad. The situation was worse than they would think. While Issei was a human, it was very much possible to extract a sacred gear from somebody, and a powerful sacred gear in the hands of the enemy was something that they couldn't ignore. That perv has something amazing in him. I can't believe that, Katase said neutrally, waving her hands in denial that the pervert that peeped at them changing could have something cool inside him. Both girls admitted it seemed hard to believe even if the book and Rias says he does. They will just have to wait and see. Look can be fooling. Yuto has two sacred gears, but he doesn't even look like he could lift his own weight. I don't act it, but I come from a very noble family. Akeno hides it, but she is really into S&M play with her enemies. Both girls went wide-eyed before they looked around at the mentioned devils. Kiba and Rias simple nodded while Akeno giggled. Oh, I wanted to keep that a surprise for now. Maybe I can show you two later. Both girls looked at one another, not sure if they should be worried or excited that Akeno was interested in doing something with them. Katase went back to the book hoping to get more information for them. Rias explained to the two new girls in the peerage, while Naruto sulked lightly at them, forgetting what they were talking about at first. Sitting down in Akeno's lap and resting his head between her breasts, he allowed himself to try and figure out what kind of sacred gear would interest the fallen angels enough to make them even try and go after Issei. That's right, I love making my enemies squirm around before begging for the sweet mercy of death. A little lightning here, and a few fireballs there before the enemy is crying delicious tears of pain. Akeno said as she traced her lower lip with her finger. A seductive look on her face to go with the blush she had on, while her eyes became slightly lidded. Naruto shivered when he noticed her breath start to come in a quickened pace against his head, and he slightly regret choosing this as his sitting place today. Okay, maybe Issei isn't as much a perv when compared to others. Murayama thought with a light pained feeling at having to admit that Issei wasn't the biggest pervert around. Rias giggled at how Akino was called a pervert while Murayama blushed at getting caught with her own, sort of, thoughts. Kiba gave a small laugh. Well, I would not say he is not a big pervert from what I see. But he at least is not afraid to admit it. True, both girls thought knowing many guys in the academy were pervs while the infamous trio were the loudest of them. They glanced at Kiba wondering if he had perverted thoughts. At least with him you only had to deal with him peeping at you, he never had the guts to actually try anything with you. This girl, the one they had looked up to, was so much more perverted than Issei could ever hope to be. Possibly, it was impossible to see the future after all, which would mean that Issei could one day be more perverted than Akino. Back to the issue. Kaneko reminded Rias that there really was an issue at the moment, while Naruto sent his sister a loving and thankful look so that she knew that he was thankful for her getting them back on topic. Yes, anyway, Issei has a very powerful sacred gear in him. It might not be very accurate, but we use pawns to see how powerful a sacred gear's base is. Kiba here was worth a knight, or 3 pawns, meaning his sacred gears aren't extremely powerful by nature. He is only this strong by training, but Issei was worth 8 pawns if Sona was telling the truth. That means he had an amazingly powerful sacred gear inside him, possible one of the 13 Longinus if I am guessing right. Rias explained with a frown on her face. The other members all frowned at this. Kataise and Murayama because Issei seems to be worth more to them, everyone but Rias at how many pawns needed for Issei and wondered if they can even have him a devil while Rias was worried but hoped her plan would work. High-level sacred gears were worth 5 through 8 pawns. Normally people had to sacrifice 2 pieces that were worth 3 pawns, like 2 knights or 2 bishops. She didn't have the amount needed to reincarnate Issei into her peerage, but she truly wanted to have that sacred gear in her team. A Longinus level sacred gear could be so helpful to her future goals. Longinus. I don't understand the term, is it something special to sacred gears? Kataise asked with a questioning tone, she was very new to being a devil. Kataise looked up at Rias, yeah, what is a Longinus? Rias waved her hand, I am sure my other self will explain, so let's see, and I might not have to repeat myself. She had no idea what any of these terms were referring to, while Rias sighed and gestured to Naruto for an explanation. The 13 Longinus are said to have the ability to grant the user the ability to kill even gods if they were powerful enough. Power like that isn't something that can be underestimated. Issei has the potential to gain enough power to be a very powerful person, but he is also a target by those that don't want him to reach his potential, or those that want that gear for themselves. If they get that gear from him, then Issei will lose his life. Naruto stated before he blinked, a crazy idea forming in his mind that might save Issei's life later. If this worked, then it was possible that they could benefit from this, and Issei wouldn't have to die. Rias saw the look on his face, and knew that he had a good idea for her. The newest pair of devils were stunned by this information. An item that has the power to kill a god. And Issei possible has a sacred gear like that. WTF. They both thought. Yes, Issei will die if he loses his sacred gear. That is the fate of sacred gear users, those that are different will always live lives that are cursed with some kind of downside. Everyone wants one, but nobody realized that having one powerful enough to matter paints a target on your back. Yuto said sadly, knowing what it was like for somebody to be after him for his sacred gear's abilities. Naruto nodded as well, he knew what it was like to be targeted because he was different. Nekosho were a race of yokai that were born and lived in the underworld for the most part, which made them strange among both devils and yokai. Both girls frowned, feeling sorry for not only Kiba but also for some others that have this faith. They glanced at a emotionless Kaneko as they were told what the twins were and figured it was best not to say anything in that matter. Then why aren't we rushing over to save him? Murayama shouted when she realized just how dangerous this situation had become. Naruto jumped off of Akino's lap, and went over to the freaking out girl's lap and made himself a new and surprisingly more comfy seat out of her thighs. She looked down at him, before she calmed down slightly. Murayama blushed picturing this and now slightly jealous of her counterpart. Kataise also frowned, wanting something like that to happen to her or her counterpart. We can't. Angels and fallen angels uses churches and abandoned churches as their bases of operation, which makes them enemy ground. We have a very shaky standoff going on right now, and the smallest thing can break it and cause another war between the three factions. Naruto's familiar is trying to take care of things because she isn't technically a devil, which means that she doesn't have the same weaknesses to holy places and objects as us. Rias stated calmly. Hey, what is Naruto's familiar? Murayama asked. You never really explained it. Rias smiled and gestured Kataise to keep reading, which she did. Reijeki may be a prissy little dragon with females, but she was a very loyal dragon to Naruto. She also helped him out with her EMF, so it helped that he could enter a crowd of devils as long as he had her with him. The downside was that he couldn't sense emotions, so it was sort of blinding to him. Then we have nothing to worry about then, right? Kataise asked, her jealously over Murayama holding onto Naruto getting the better of her when she saw how her friend was holding his head to her chest. Murayama could not help but stick her tongue out at Kataise, who gained a tick mark. Kaneko eyebrow twitched as she did not want to hear these girls, especially if they were in the same room as her, fighting over her brother to keep for themselves. She was glad she did not have a twin or in that situation, otherwise she might have to hurt them. Yes, we do. Reijeki isn't powerful enough to take on a group of fallen angels. If there is a group, if there is only one, she can do it, but if there are more, then she will just be able to try and get Issei here as fast as possible. Naruto said while hiding a grin on his face. Even if Issei died, it wasn't like they couldn't bring him back. What made Issei worth so much to turn into a pawn was because of his sacred gear, but if he didn't have that sacred gear inside him, they would be able to get him into the group with only a single pawn. Of course, if they brought him back without putting his sacred gear inside him first, it was possible he would never be able to get it back, but that was a small price to pay. If it could be placed back inside him, then they would be able to get a Longinus for the price of a single pawn. Rias frowned as she never considered that, but she also felt it might be too cruel for her to do, so she forced that thought away. Naruto would be the first to admit that this was a great deal. Getting a Longinus user for the price of one pawn was simply too good of a chance to pass up. Sure, his potential would be much smaller than if they used the full 8 pawns, but he still had a Longinus. That was simply too good of a chance to pass up, and he would need to explain his plan to Rias. If they couldn't bring him back at all, they would just have to steal the sacred gear from the fallen angels and save it for later when they could make good use of it. He hated thinking about things like this, or considering Issei to be a tool, but at this point he didn't have much option. Issei was already in the church, where they would risk war by directly going there to help him. If they stole a stolen object from a fallen angel, they would not risk war, and if they brought back a dead human as a devil, they wouldn't be risking war either. Not only would all of them be amazing, but Rias would still have 5 pawns left. That would mean she could have up to 5 more pawns, another bishop, and another knight. That was 7 more pieces, which meant she would have a very unique set for her peerage. Kataise paused slightly as she gave a quick head count in her head. She noticed that they were missing some people if the numbers Naruto had were right. She pushed it aside as she figured Rias just did not found the people she wanted for those pieces yet. Naruto was trickier than people gave him credit for, even more so when it came to getting things that could be important at a later date. Of course, this was all in the hopes that Issei's body didn't get destroyed in the process. Extracting stronger sacred gears had the chance of ripping the inside of the body, which could end up in Issei's body being destroyed behind the ability to fix. It was all a gamble, and it was Issei's fault for not resisting the titties that he could die. If Naruto had been able to act like he wanted to, then Issei wouldn't be in this situation, but sadly he had more than himself to consider in this. His actions reflected on Rias and her family, and Issei wasn't as important to him as they were. Familiar? Kataise asked when she realized that had been a term that had been used during this conversation, while Rias nodded with her smile returned to her face. Kataise and Murayama did not bother to ask this time as they knew for sure they would be getting answers from the book. Familiars are creatures that we can contract as our helpers, they do what we want them to do. It is sort of like a rite of passage to ally yourself with one. I have one, Yuto has one, Kaneko has one, Akino has a small family as little demons, and Naruto has 2 familiars, one of which he can't summon most of the time. Rias described to the girls, both of which saw Naruto blush lightly and bury his face in Murayama's chest to hide his embarrassed blush. Kataise and Murayama cooed aloud at this imagine in their heads, which did not help Kaneko's twitch. Akino giggled as well, Ah, I really want to know what he has to do to summon his other familiar. I rather know what it is. Rias pouts as she has gotten no clue so far, otherwise the price, even if not a lot of detail, and that it was somewhat powerful. He should have never shown Rias his second familiar. He was really regretting that choice. The price was just too humiliating for him to do half of the time. Are we going to get familiars? Katace asked as she pointed to her and her best friend, who also seemed to be excited at the thought of having somebody lower on the totem pole than her. Katace and Murayama both looked excited at Rias, who giggled. When they got no answer, Katace started reading again. Not yet. Right now you should both raise your power enough so that you can handle the strain having a familiar places on you. In a few weeks maybe, and around a dozen more contracts before I would even begin to think you are ready. So yes, eventually you will get a familiar. Rias spoke with her usual tone, letting them know that they would be getting familiars eventually, just not today. After the last time they went familiar hunting with somebody that wasn't ready, they had been forced to retreat. She wasn't about to immediately try and get her peerage newbies familiars right away again. The two pawns looked at Rias with raised brows, who shrugged, not really sure herself. Don't worry too much about it though. Pawns are very important in chess, and in raiding games they are just as important. Naruto stated to calm the two girls down, his head now out of Murayama's breasts with his blush gone. The two girls seemed to be confused again, and Kaneko sighed before she gave the two of them a deadpan look. Raiding games are ways for devils to compete and show their strength, and raise up in rank through impressive feats of battle. The better you make yourself look, and show of your power, in a raiding game, the more likely you are to be considered for a promotion to a higher status. Kaneko explained to the pawns of the ground, and with a nod Rias decided to pick up where Kaneko left off, knowing that the two girls wouldn't understand the big deal about rank either. Katace and Murayama both sighed as they hoped they would understand this better in the future. In the underworld your status is given a rank. The lowest being a low-class devil, and the highest being an ultimate class. In between them are the middle class and high class. There are even ranks within the ranks. Rias stated as she brought out a chart using magic, and drew a picture of a triangle with multiple colored sections inside of it. The top section said ultimate class, under it was high class, with middle class under that, and finally low class at the very bottom. Ultimate class, Demon Lord, Great King, Archduke, Duke, Prince, Princess. High class, Marquis, Margrave, Margravine, Count, Countess, Viscount, Viscountess, Baron, Baroness. Middle class, Baronet, Baroness, Knight, Dame. Low class. Katace blinked as Murayama thought it over. Katace then asked, "We are low class, aren't we?" Rias nodded. Well, all reincarnated devils start out that way. Well-known fact, but among devils the House of Grimoire is given the title of Duke, making them the fourth highest rank among devils. Rias doesn't have her family rank yet, but she was born a high-class devil because she comes from one of the 72 pillar families. She doesn't really have a rank among high class though. Akeno explained with a smile on her face, while Rias nodded without getting insulted by her lack of true rank. She hadn't done anything to earn her rank, but that didn't really bother her as much as it used to. Small note, but when a devil becomes a high-class devil they are usually given the chance to gain their own evil pieces and get their own peerage. Of course, if Rias were to ever need us in a raiding game we would still have to help her. Yuto explained to the less confused girls, and everything was starting to make sense to them now that it was being explained more clearly. Okay, but what rank are the rest of you? Murayama asked with a truly curious expression on her face, so Rias cleared her throat and made a second chart next to her rankings chart. She started to write down names so that it would be easy for them to understand, and next to the names she placed ranks. Rias Grimoire, high class. Naruto Tuju, middle class, baronet. Akeno Himehime, low class. Kaneko Tuju, low class. Yuto Kiba, low class. Gaspar Vladi, low class. Is that right here? Murayama asked. Rias thought it over. Well, replace Naruto with Akeno and yes, it is how our group is. You two are low class as well, and the closest to getting to high class at the moment is the queen here. He was given the chance to promote when he was younger thanks to some pretty amazing feats and contracts he was able to pull off. One more promotion and he will be allowed to gain his own peerage, but if I am ever in a raiding game he will have to fight for me again. Rias explained with a thumb pointing at Naruto, using him as an example of the fact that gaining power didn't change the fact that he was in somebody's peerage. Naruto shrugged, not really caring what rank he was. He only took those promotion exams because he wanted to stop being a low class, and with it stop being underestimated as much. The 72 pillar families, that sounds like a lot of families. Kataise groaned out, while Naruto decided to show them that he did have some knowledge that people wouldn't expect. Kataise looked down and gulped, dang, that is a lot of names. Rias giggled, well, try your best anyways. Kataise sighed before she took a deep breath and started to read. Yep, and they are the Baal, Argares, Visago, Gamagen, Marbas, Valifor, Aemon, Barbados, Paimon, Buer, Gujan, Citri, Belith, Larahe, Eligos, Zapar, Bodies, Bathan, Salos, Person, Marax, Ipos. Kataise gasped for breath and started again. Aim, Nibirius, Glacia Labelas, Bune, Ranov, Berith, Astaroth, Furnius, Foras, Asmodee, Gop, Furfur, Marchosias, Stolos, Phonex, Halphus, Malphas, Rame, Focular. Kataise stopped again to breathe. Weppel, Sabnok, Shax, Vine, Bifrons, Uval, Hagen-T, Chrysel, Furkas, Balam, Alasar, Kame, Murmur, Oribus, Grimori, Oz, Amy. Again she had to stop as it was a lot of name and trying to say them all to get them out of the way. Oriax, Vapula, Zagan, Valak, Abdras, Flauros, Andrialphus, Samaris, Amdicias, Belial, Decarabia, Seer, Dantalion, and finally Andromalius. Kataise gasped once more as she finished, damn, Naruto really has some talent there. After she got her breathing under control she started again, much to Rias and the others' amusement. Crap, that was a mouthful. Naruto said as he took a deep gulp of air, having managed to say that entire list with a single breath was something that he was going to brag about later when he had the chance. That was not going to be happening again anytime soon. Rias pouts her as she cannot do that even if she wanted to or tried. As long as that list is, you won't have to remember them all. Only 34 of the 72 pillar families still retain their status. Either the other families were wiped out, or their blood became mixed with human blood and they lost their status. Rias explained with her eyebrows still raised at the fact that Naruto had the entire 72 families known by memory. Even she couldn't brag about being able to say them all without pausing to remember a few of them that no longer exist. Rias nodded as she had to admit the book was right. The Baal is considered the most powerful family, you know, Bukka's mother is from the Baal family. That is how she was born, with the power of destruction that the Baal family were born with. The Grimori family were all born with high magic reserves and great control over those reserves. Akeno stated as a fact with a slight smirk towards a smirking Rias, who was holding a black and red flame in her hand before she threw it towards a potted plant, that was evaporated instantly the second it made contact with the plant. Showing just how powerful her magic was. Kataise and Murayama were stunned before they looked at a smiling Rias. The devil was proud of her family's ability and would have to show them later. Of course, just because you are low class doesn't mean that you are automatically weaker than the other classes. Akeno here is a low class, and she is able to fight on par with me half of the time thanks to how hard she trained herself. Rias explained, while Akeno placed a hand to her blushing cheek with a graceful smile on her face. Naruto was smiling as well, because he only had one more promotion to go before he would be a high class like Rias. He wished that Kaneko had been given the same chance he had for promotion, but she had never been as good at making contracts as him, at least when it came to impressive contracts. Naruto blinked when he realized something that had happened again. They had completely forgotten that they were talking about Issei in the first place. Well, I say this information was better than reading about the perv, Kataise said before she passed the book to Murayama, who wanted to read now. Nyahahaha. Finally the time for you to call on me has come. Kuroka shouted towards her younger sister from inside the shared apartment of Naruto and Kaneko. The new pawns blinked. Who is that? Murayama asked. Rias glanced at Kaneko, who frowned slightly but nodded. She figured her sister would show up more often now that she wasn't a criminal there, so they might as well know now. Rias turned to her pawns and said, Kuroka is an S-rank rouge devil that is wanted for killing her master and many other devils. Reason she is here is because she is the older sister of Kaneko and Naruto. Both girls were stunned hearing this. Kiba then added, well, that is the issue with Koka here. In there she is working for Rias' older brother, although we not know what she does for him. Murayama pout wanting to know more of this new character, but new reading would be the easiest way. Koka had teleported into their home the second that Kaneko had called onto her for help on the issue involving Naruto's growing ability to sense emotions. Kaneko was sitting on the couch with a sour expression on her face, before Koka jumped onto the couch next to her and wrapped an arm around her little sister. She gave her little sister a good shake and started to grin at being needed by somebody other than Searsex or Naruto. She had forced herself to take some time off spying just for the chance to help her sister, while Kaneko sighed and prepared herself to get teased. Koka always teased people for some of the simplest things these days, it was in her nature, and she knew this when calling Koka for help. Well, I think that is more being a big sister than anything else, Kataise muttered while Kaneko gave a small scowl. Stop joking around, Oni-san, Kaneko stated, while putting as much stress on the san in her title to Kaneko. Surprisingly, Koka nodded lightly and just started to calm herself down. If Kaneko was calling her for something, then she must really be needed. Got it, Nya, so what is the issue, Nya? Koka asked with concern hidden deeply in her voice. It would never be said that Koka was very good at showing how worried she was half of the time. Kaneko took a deep breath and looked at her sister with her more serious than normal face. Because her face was always serious, it was hard to tell the difference for those that didn't understand her tell signs. The others nodded, getting Kaneko to give them all deadpan looks. Ototo's powers are growing to the point they are affecting him negatively. Do you know a way to stop it or suppress them? Kaneko questioned her older sibling, getting right to the point. Koka frowned lightly for a moment when she tried to consider Kaneko's words. She scratched her chin in thought for a few moments, wondering if she should reveal what she did know to Kaneko. Deciding it would be best to reveal the information to at least her younger sister, she took a deep breath. His powers are in an unstable state right now, a state of growing. I recently brought this up to another person, and he told me that he had suspected for a while now that Naruto-kun had been gifted with a form of sacred gear. His emotion sensing abilities stem from his sacred gear, but until his sacred gear activates he won't be able to fully control, turn on and off, his powers at will. Koka explained with a frown on her face, knowing there was a problem with no current solution was annoying to her. There were ways to block out other people from Naruto's mind, but that would mean that he would have no access to his ability at all. Any method that they could use to help him would also cause him trouble. His current method of focusing on one person was good enough at the moment. After all, the only reason Naruto has trouble with his ability are times when he is surrounded by literally hundreds or thousands of people. The stress of those many emotions were what caused him the trouble, or those rare cases when a person was so filled with hate and insanity that they caused Naruto to become sick from the extremely conflicting emotions. Sacred gear, that's impossible. Only humans can be born with those. Kaneko denied right off the bat, while Koka shook her head at her sister. Well, that would be for most cases, Rias thought, recalling the first chapter. Not only was his sacred gear made from his own power, but it was made while he was a human before he was reborn. Wrong, that only applies to the sacred gears created by the biblical god. The ones that were made by other types of gods can be gifted to certain species of their choice. While it is true that a pure-blooded devil can't be born with a sacred gear, Naruto, you and I are not devils by birth, nor am I a devil at all. That means that if a type of god wants to give us a sacred gear when we are born, it is possible, but unlikely. Nya. Koka explained very carefully to her doubtful sibling. Bullshit, Kaneko muttered, getting Akino to giggle. The entire thing sounded far-fetched to her, but she had to admit that there were times when weird things happened around Naruto. Like that sun and infinity symbol that would occasionally show up on the palm of his right hand. You are sure? Kaneko asked, making sure that Koka was completely sure about this before she trusted her answer. Kaneko knew it was a different world, but it was still strange to hear herself trust her sister. Koka nodded before she reached in between her cleavage and pulled out a small collar. She handed it to Kaneko, and the white-haired girl looked at the strange collar with a frown on her face. The collar was small enough that it would only fit around either her neck or Naruto's neck. She guessed that it was for Naruto, because it was made from a black leather material. On the front of the collar was a small glowing green gem, and inside the gem there seemed to be a small amount of electricity inside of it. That is a collar with crystallized lightning as the base NYA. It has a high enough electrical field that it should completely negate his powers, unless he is touching somebody he won't be able to sense emotions. That means he can't use his powers when he is wearing that, so no sensing ability to help him NYA. Rias and Akino both blinked and looked shocked when they heard what the base of the collar was. The others did not notice even if Kataise and Murayama thought Naruto would look cute in the little collar. Kaneko scowled slightly at the fact her twin would be wearing a collar even if it was to help him. Kuroka warned her sister of the drawbacks of helping Naruto in this way. That collar was something that she had gotten for herself a long time ago to help her sneak past people with emotion-sensing abilities, and now she was going to have Kaneko give it to their little brother to help him negate his own powers. Kaneko looked at the stone and nodded lightly in understanding. If Naruto wore this, then he wouldn't be able to sense emotions of people he wasn't touching anymore. That wasn't fixing the problem, it was just like giving him a medicine for it. If his powers grew too strong, it was possible that he would start to sense emotions again. I see, and how did you get this? Crystallized lightning is pretty expensive enough to put a rich family in the poor house. Really? Murayama asked, stunned hearing this. Rias nodded. Yes, it is very rare and very expensive. Only the riches of families like my own, the Phoenix or a few others can buy one, and even then it would take a large chunk of our wealth. Damn, Kataise spoke pretty much everyone's thought at that statement. Murayama blinked as she looked down at the book again. Then where did she get it? The other were quite not sure what to say. Kaneko just scowled, knowing her sister was up to no good to get that for her brother. Kaneko questioned with narrowed eyes, and Kuroka chuckled nervously. That was a question that she did not want to answer right now, or at all. Kaneko's suspicions were confirmed here. Having this was pretty bad for her, so she was happy to get rid of it to somebody that would actually need it now. Kuroka bent down and kissed her sister on the cheek, before she jumped back and vanished into the shadows of the apartment. Kaneko touched her kissed cheek, before she frowned and looked at the collar in her hand. She didn't like it, but she knew that Kuroka wouldn't play a cruel trick on her by denying either other her siblings help. That would mean that this thing was able to help her out with Naruto. Kaneko was quite as she was thinking of her sister. Would she act the same way? Do anything to help and protect her? Somewhere far away a certain cat sneezed hard, wondering where that came from. A flash of red showed a magic circle floating in the air, and seconds later a very annoyed Naruto was seen walking through the magic circle before the red teleported vanished into nothing. Kaneko didn't need emotion-sensing powers to tell that her brother was in a pretty bad mood over something. Rias leaned closer, wondering what had happened. She got her answer moments later when she saw him throw a red item onto the chair nearby the couch. She looked at the object closer and saw that it was a red gauntlet type of item with a green gem in the center of the gauntlet. Two spikes of yellow jet out of the gauntlet and pointed towards the back end of the item, while the rest of the object was designed very similar to a dragon's scales in a way. Twice critical, the guy's sacred gear was a freaking twice critical. Naruto said with an angry stomp on the ground at the fact that when Reijeki had come back with Issei's body, she had also brought along with her the abandoned sacred gear that the fallen angel that had stolen it didn't even want anymore. What? Rias shouted while everyone jumped and looked at her. Her eye twitched in annoyance. Kataise asked, "What's wrong?" "There is no way it can be a simple twice critical," Rias replied with a huff as she crossed her arms and pouted angrily. As she mutters to herself, the two new pawns looked to the others and Kiba explained, "A twice critical is a common sacred gear and can double a user's power once at critical times. But seeing how weak Issei seems to be and how he was not turned into a devil sooner means he has to have a more powerful sacred gear. It makes no sense," Rias added with a growl. "No twice critical can be worth using 8 pawns to make into a devil. There has to be a mistake." "Read," Kaneko suggested, and Kataise started off again, hoping to find an answer for Rias. Seriously, once the fallen angels had discovered that the sacred gear was only a twice critical, they said screw it and threw the damn thing away. Reijeki was easily able to retrieve both the sacred gear and Issei's body and bring them back the clubroom after Issei had been killed. "So I take it the perv is dead?" Kaneko asked to make sure, while Naruto huffed and hopped onto the couch with another glare at the sacred gear for causing so much trouble for them. Rias nodded with a huff while Katace and Murayama frowned. They did not like the pervert, but they were sad to hear he was just killed and thrown away for nothing. Yeah, the fallen angel killed him to get his sacred gear, but they didn't want a twice critical and threw it away. Rias has already brought Issei back as a pawn, but now the stupid gear is refusing to become a part of Issei again. Try touching it. Rias blinked hearing this. Even as a twice critical should return to the owner if they are brought back as a devil. And Issei only died recently, so why would it not come back to him? Naruto suggested as he pointed at the sacred gear on the chair. Finding something weird about the way he said that, Kaneko walked over to the chair and placed her hand on the sacred gear, only for her to draw back her hand right after touching the gear like she was burned. Her hand was smoking slightly from touching the sacred gear, and she was looking at it in shock. That sucks, it is hot. Kaneko said with a light scowl to Naruto for making her touch something that was that hot. Kaneko pouts at her brother for tricking her like that. Akeno giggled at both the face and the way Naruto tricked his sister. Naruto shook his head and walked over to the sacred gear and picked it up like it was nothing. It isn't hot, it is being very picky about who can touch it. Only Issei, Reijeki, and myself are able to touch this thing without getting burnt. I think it won't let itself be used by anyone that doesn't have a connection to a dragon of some form. I have a pretty strong affinity to dragons, Reijeki is a dragon, and being the original user Issei has an affinity for it. Naruto said with a toss as he put the sacred gear right back onto the chair. Rias started thinking it over, has an affinity for dragons, huh? Why does that sound familiar? Calming himself down before he exploded over something small, he allowed himself to think about the good parts of having Issei as a fellow member of Rias' peerage. Naruto's sweat dropped when he realized that right now there really wasn't anything special about having Issei as a member of the team. He was just another pawn right now because of his old sacred gear refusing to allow anyone to use it. For a twice critical, the thing was pretty picky about who was allowed to touch it and use it. Rias moaned thinking of that. If it was true, then not only was Issei useless to her there but maybe here as well. At least a twice critical is better than nothing. Wow, gear with attitude. Kaneko said with a raised eyebrow to the picky sacred gear. Naruto was just upset that he had thought that sacred gear was one of the 13 Longinus, something that was understandable to be upset about. Yeah, and to make things worse, Issei needs to be trained to the normal level of a pawn. Right now he is weaker than Riser's weakest pawn, so he is like zero help for a rating game. He may be only one pawn, but it was a pawn wasted right now, until he get training to form some kind of useful skill. Naruto stated with an annoyed sigh. Rias moaned again knowing that was true, she prayed that this was not the case to Issei here. Of course, he wasn't saying Issei was completely hopeless. It was very much possible that he would get a skill that he would be able to use during a rating game, but right now he had no such skill. Why would a twice critical be worth 8 pawns? Kaneko asked, while Naruto sighed and glared at the thing. If it had a personality then it would be considered a living being, so this gear was actually worth 7 pawns, while Issei was worth a single pawn. Together they added up to 8 pawns, but they reincarnated Issei without the gear, so it was only a price of 1 pawn to turn Issei to their side. Katace and Murayama, who had no knowledge of sacred gears beforehand, could see the logic in that. At least it is the sacred gear worth a lot and not Issei himself, Murayama thought. He ever gets a big head, I will have to be sure to remind him of this. Who knows why, but it might just be a stubborn twice critical. It must have been resisting the changing process for Sona and increasing the price of pawns needed NYA. Naruto explained with best possible idea he had to explain it. He didn't need the sacred gear, and Issei wasn't strong enough where it would be any good to him even if he could use it properly. Right now they would just need to find something to do with it. Rias had given it to him and told him to do with it what he wanted. Naruto grinned lightly when he went over to the gear and placed his hand on the green gem. This thing was being stubborn, so Naruto would show it who was boss by flooding it with his own power. Is that even a good idea? Katace asked, pausing in her reading. Rias shrugged, not really sure, but she figured Naruto would be fine. He could feel the sacred gear's emotions by touching it, and the thing seemed to be upset over recently being removed from its proper owner. Naruto sent a burst of energy through it, and the green gem absorbed the energy right away. Naruto blinked at how it absorbed his energy and seemed to get more powerful, and Kaneko noticed his confusion. What was that? The older sister wondered when she saw Naruto sent another pulse of his power into the sacred gear. Both of them jumped back in the surprise when the entire thing started to glow. Dragon Boost. The group paused at what Kata's just read. Rias blinked before she gained a look of shock. Can it be? She wondered aloud. She looked at Kata's, not noticing the looks the others were giving her. Keep reading. They both blinked when they heard a voice shout out from the sacred gear, and when the light died down they were able to see the sacred gear's new form. The entire things had changed to a deeper red color, and had become more gauntlet-like than before. Before it was larger and thicker, but this one was more like an armored red glove that had sharp red armored fingers and a green gem on top of the hand. The thing looked like it would cover a good part of a person's forearm, and the yellow spikes moved to the back of the glove, with smaller red spikes going up the sides. The 5 fingers on the armored gauntlet were now more claw-like, while the armor on the forearm of the gauntlet became more scale-like. Rias gasped, as did Akino, who also recognized it. It wasn't a twice critical, fuck yeah. Naruto shouted while pumping his fist in the air. He should have known that he was right the first time he had guessed that this would be a good sacred gear. It may have looked like a twice critical at first to everyone, but this was a much more powerful dragon-based gear than it originally looked. This was not a twice critical, this was the boosted gear. Yes. Rias could not keep her excitement inside. I knew he had to have a powerful gear. Wait, he does have something powerful. Murayama asked, stunned. Rias nodded and waved to Kata's to read on, as she was sure the book would explain. The boosted gear was a powerful Longinus that could double the user's power every 10 seconds, and inside it was said to be a very strong dragon sealed away. It was not the strongest Longinus, but it was a powerful one. Naruto almost laughed at how the fallen angels had literally thrown away such a powerful tool out of the idea that it was a simply twice critical. Yeah, he had made a similar mistake, but he found it funny that they actually threw away a Longinus because of how it looked on the outside. Rias laughed now, knowing she had a chance at getting a powerful gear like that. Her excitement peaked even more as she remembered her counterpart had it as well, even if she had to find someone to us it. Wait, Naruto can touch it. That means my, or rather her queen, has a Longinus. Riser would not stand a chance then. What are you going to do with it? Kaneko asked the number one question, while Naruto was honestly stumped at that one. Rias blinked. What? No. Naruto, please have the gear to us. Please, please, please. Kata's and Murayama looked at Rias while the rest of her peerage looked embarrassed. Kata's leaned over and whispered to Murayama, she does know she is talking to a book, right? Murayama just shrugged. He had no idea what he was going to do with it, and using it wasn't something he really wanted to do for himself. Naruto shrugged and picked up the sacred gear before he placed it under the couch. He would leave it there until he could think of what he should do with it. Rias gasped hearing what Naruto did with the Longinus, while Akino giggled and Kiba had a deadpan look. At the moment nothing really came into his mind, because he knew that the boosted gear came at the cost of stamina. The more you used it, the quicker it drained your stamina. Of course, he had a lot of stamina, but that didn't mean he could waste his stamina like an idiot by relying on a sacred gear to do his work for him. He actually liked to train himself. Kata's closed the book as the chapter was done. Rias was still recovering the shock her counterpart's queen just ignored a Longinus like that. Kaneko was thinking of what her brother said. If he had the gear, that me might be dependent on it and not grow as strong. She knew Riser fell back on his immortality and even Rias her powers of destruction, and she felt Issei might be the same. She decided that she would make sure Issei would not make the mistake the other may make. Rias finally recovered and stood up. Alright, I think that is enough reading for now. We have to get you two ready to start making contracts, and I have to keep an eye on Issei so I can turn him into a devil at the right moment. Contracts? Kata's asked as Rias held 2 stakes of filers out of nowhere for the two before her. Thanks for watching.